I am so excited about this class. We have been trying recipes, new recipes. I had encountered some difficulties with a couple of the recipes and didn't want you to get frustrated. And always in search of a more delicious bread and roll. We've done some experimenting, and so I'm excited to share these with you today. I want to let you know, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Denise, and I need the base to this in just a minute. And I'll be your guide basically today for the gluten-free bread and rolls. Now we will be keying on bread and rolls, so you know, there won't be a lot of variety in what you taste today. However, I want you to leave today encouraged. I want you to leave today with some great recipes that you can confidently go home and reproduce in your own kitchen. And so those are our goals. If you will permit me, I'd like for us just to start off with a brief prayer, and then we'll jump right into our lesson. Thank you. Father, we just thank you for this time together. We thank you for bringing us together, giving us this opportunity. And God, I just ask that you would truly encourage every person who's present. We pray for every home represented and ask your blessing upon it. I pray for myself, Lord, and ask that you would just give me a clarity of mind and the ability to share details and instructions and information in a clear, concise way. And we just thank you for all you're going to do, and we give you the glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for that. You see, we have a display of all kinds of great things for you. I have a handout for you, which is your fistful of recipes to take home with you. I'm highlighting for you 4 cookbooks today. And I think that I will touch on the cookbooks first. I've got them right over here. And Maggie, if you would grab me one of each of those books, please. Well, I'm sorry. Actually, she's got 3 of them here. It looks like I just need Gluten-Free Baking Classics for the Bread Machine. That first one. There we go. Thank you. So the recipe collections that I'm highlighting for you will be in addition to the recipes that you're holding in your hand. I will say that if you plan to make your gluten-free breads in the bread machine, then this book is absolutely essential. You really need this one. Not only does it contain lots of great gluten-free bread recipes, but she has done extensive research and trials, and all of her know-how and tips are included for you. And so if you plan to make your gluten-free bread and rolls, or not rolls, but bread in the bread machine, then it's very important that you take the time to read the pages that are prior to the recipes and follow her instructions. One thing that I need to stress is when you're making a gluten-free recipe, there's not a lot of leeway for sloppy measuring and erroneous substitutions and additions in your recipe. You really need to stick with the program. So I know for some personalities you just are going to feel like you're in a straitjacket, but especially initially as you learn, stick with the program and you can't go wrong. And one important thing that I'll say about this is the bread machine that we carry is the Zoharushi brand. That is the bread machine that got the very best results in all of her tests. She tested in lots of bread machines, but the Zoharushi yielded the nicest results. So just an interesting point there. And then some of the other recipe books I want to introduce to you. It's my honor to have helping me today Ashley McCord. She is the Becker eldest daughter, and Sharon Fescanon. And when could you come over for just a second, Sharon? as I tell you about this cookbook, I want you to know the author is here
Thank
with
you.
us today. So she has a lot. Thank you so much, Sharon. Sharon Fiscanon, Mommy and Me, Gluten-Free. You'll like this book even if you don't have a child who needs to eat gluten-free. And the recipes are wonderful for picky eaters because Sharon's mindset is she wants folks to be able to taste it and talk about how delicious it, realize it's delicious before they realize it's gluten-free. She can tell them that later, but she's been successful, and so great book there. And then I want to highlight for you country beans. You may or may not be aware that all the dried beans are gluten-free. So you'll be able to, you can cook with those, boiling them as you probably have for years, but you can also make bean flour fresh in your mill and use that in some of your recipes. And she just has great options for doing that. Included in this book are a gluten-free bread and rolls flour recipe. You'll find that on page 6, but in addition to that, there's a gluten-free biscuit recipe. There's a flour mix for your pancakes, and one of those she also has on the same page a dairy-free option, and then the muffins. The gluten-free muffin mix that she gives you has a variation for cakes. And so these are going to be high protein, wonderful recipes. Almost everything in this book is already gluten-free, and the index in the back lets you know that with the capital GF beside it. And then the few that are not, you simply can substitute your gluten-free flour mix in the appropriate recipe. So highly recommend that one as well. You'll see some recipes specifically out of that one in Gluten-Free 201, which is Beyond Bread. We'll do pretty much everything but bread and rolls in Gluten-Free 201, and that's coming up soon. So if you weren't aware of that class, I hope that you'll check out the information and see if that date meets with your schedule. Okay, important fact about your gluten-free grains. First of all, I have listed them for you in your handout. I've given you a list of several of the ingredients that you can expect to use in your baking, and those ingredients will be called for, of course, in these recipes that we're giving you today. But then following that, I've given you a list of almost every gluten-free grain, and beside that, information that just highlights some of its nutritional strengths. I want you to have that with you, go home and take a good look at it, and don't miss that in with those descriptions I have also given you a couple of additional recipes, easy things that you can, just some great ideas for how to use that grain on a regular basis or as you like. So I want you to see those. And then finally, and very importantly, I want to draw a distinction and a contrast between the gluten-free bread flour mixes excuse me, that are available in the grocery stores and that kind of thing, and the flour that we'll be baking with today. And one of the most important things is the fact that these flours are going to be milled fresh right as we're using them. For those of you who arrived early, you saw me milling several different grains on the spot for the multigrain bread that we'll have in a little bit. And why would that matter? First of all, the bread flour mixes at the grocery store, typically the primary ingredient on those that I have looked at is white rice flour. White rice flour is just virtually void of any nutrition. It definitely doesn't have the fiber that our systems need. And with gluten-free bread and rolls, particularly if it's a yeast bread offering, you're required, just by the nature of the beast, if you will, to use 50% starches in most of those recipes. So we want the grain portion of the recipe to be 100% whole grain, and we want it to be freshly milled because of something called oxidation. We're all aware of oxidation. I heard a doctor speak, actually it was on tape, but the doctor was speaking to a conference of other doctors and highlighting some essentials of nutrition, but he used a phrase that has stuck with me about the oxidation, and he said, aging is oxidation and oxidation is aging. And that term just kind of stuck with me, but you've seen that. If you slice an apple and leave it laying there, it turns brown. And that's because the air is oxidizing those nutrients. Vitamin E, antioxidant. You've heard that? So it's on the front line. It's going to be one of the first to be used. But the bottom line here, the most important point is once we mill these grains, they are going to begin to oxidize. So we're going to mill our flour fresh for the job at hand and use that flour right away. I will show you what I have learned to do as I mill various grains. Typically in my gluten-free bread and rolls, there are going to be several grains called for. And so as I mill those, I keep some sort of jar or dish that I can keep covered or return the lid to, and just keep at, the little bit that is over the amount I need for my recipe, I'm going to just dump into that bowl. And it kind of looks like sand art. I don't know if you can see from there the variations of color from the different grains that are in there, but there's a little bit of every grain that's listed on your handout other than corn, I think, in this container right now. And so you may be wondering, well, then what are you going to do with it? Because now you have this flour that you've milled and you said, my vitamins are going to oxidize. Well, I'm going to use that for tomorrow morning's pancakes or muffins. Those recipes, I can actually get away with 100% whole grain flour. I don't have to use, in most of those recipes, I don't have to use 50% starches. So that's a great place to get that fiber in to the diet. And while we're talking about fiber and digestion in general, I want to point out that oftentimes those of us who are eating a restricted diet of some sort, we've developed a food allergy. And we may have a more permeable gut, which means those food particles are able to escape directly into your bloodstream, and then you're building antibodies against that. And so in my case, I actually had a list of 7 or 8 foods that I had become very sensitive to. And through a diet where I avoided the offenders for a season, a long spell, I was able to add almost all of those back. The only grain that I still cannot tolerate is corn. And I had an undiagnosed food allergy to it since childhood. As I look back on my tummy issues and the specific things that I always felt bad after I ate, and I was the one who would go to the movies but couldn't get popcorn because I didn't want to be up all night with a tummy ache. So I can see looking back, but it went undiagnosed until a year ago, which, so some of you may be living some of that truth out in your life as well. But the great news is oftentimes, if it's just a food sensitivity, if it's not celiac disease, then oftentimes you can overcome that through healing the gut and through avoiding the offender for a time. I will tell you that I understand what it is to avoid wheat altogether. I did eat a wheat-free diet for 2 full years, and so I'm sensitive to your frustrations of trying to eat out, trying to eat with fellowship with other friends, and eat with a family who perhaps does not have your limitations, and have learned to work around that. But corn is just as difficult to avoid, and particularly if you're shopping at the grocery store, because it's in everything in one form or another. And when I finally realized that corn starch was a major component in baking powder, that was like the missing link. You know, that was that last place where I kept getting the cornstarch and didn't know it. And so I'm able to just make my cornstarch fresh now at home using, it's only 3 ingredients: baking soda, arrowroot powder, and cream of tartar. So that's all it is. I want to make something for you that we will enjoy that won't be bread and rolls, but I'm making this because it contains a couple of things that are going to be very healing to our gut and very nutritious to kickstart our morning, give us some great energy and power to run on. I think I'm putting this on backwards. And that is the two nutritional supplements that I'm highlighting are Firm Plus and Sweet Wheat. Do I? Oh, I've already locked the lid. Okay. You've seen Food Network? It's not as easy as it looks to talk and do what you're doing. But no excuses. We're going to do this. We're going to have a great time. I have for you mixed fruit. In your handout, I've given you this recipe. I hope that you'll go home and repeat this anytime. And of course, this doesn't have to be just for breakfast. This would be a great snack. This would be a great way to cool off on a hot summer day. But we're going to use some frozen mixed fruit. And I'm actually going to double this recipe so that you can all have a nice little tasting of it. And then the only thing I forgot to pull out, I believe I have some sweet wheat. I saw sweet wheat in one of the drawers around here. Ashley, could you see if you can round that up? I need 2 capsules, please. Okay, and then I believe we have the larger canisters of the Phyto Berry right down here for you, but we do sell it in these little single-serve packets. Great for traveling, great for packing in your lunch if you work somewhere like I do and you have access to the Tri-Best blender. For your lunch or your snack, then that works out great. So, but I'm going to be doubling the recipe that you're reading, and so we're going to start with a couple of cups of water. Switch that from ice to water. And then a couple of cups, a couple of cups of frozen fruit. And I've just chosen the mixed fruit, and I'm going to tell you what's in it, just in case some of you have allergies. I know one of my children can't have mango or pineapple, and that appears in a lot of fruit mixes. This one actually I don't think has either of those. Strawberries, peaches, cantaloupe. Oh, it does have pineapple. Red seedless grapes. Okay. So talk to me for just a minute, by a show of hands. How many of you have a food sensitivity or allergy other than wheat or gluten? Something else that you have to avoid? Okay, see, that's several hands. That's probably 1/5 of the people in the room. And so let me get you to tell me what it is that you cannot have. Okay, we'll just kind of start this way and work our way around. You hopefully saw each other's hands and know who's who. Okay, so gluten-free, dairy-free. What else? Egg-free. Dairy and corn. Okay. Dairy and wheat. Okay. Anybody have something else? Eggs and dairy. Okay. Well, I have good news for the egg-free, dairy-free crowd. Because I had a call from one of you, and I appreciate that so much, knowing in advance. But I always assume there's one in the crowd, and so we're doing some recipes that you can have, and I actually even made a couple of things special for y'all so that when we do something that has the egg and dairy, you can have an alternative. All right, that's about 2 cups of fruit. See if I can do that without splashing. There we go. And then to that, I'm going to add a couple of the Phyto Berry packets. If you have the canisters, you just are going to use 1 scoop from your can. Let me get the scissors. That's a great question. Let me put my glasses on so I can tell you, because the ingredients are phenomenal. And everything that you're going to get in this is wonderful. Okay, first of all, several berries, several different kinds of berries, pomegranate, mangosteen, prune, blueberry, raisin, cranberry, strawberry, more berries, apricot, raspberry, don't know how to say that one, blackberry. Just it's a long list of berries, and then the phytonutrients is actually a long list as well. So I am going to encourage you to pick up the canister, pick up one of the packets, and take a look at that. Meanwhile, let's get it blended so these ladies can serve some up. If you'll grab some of those little clear cups, they're first thing on that shelf back there. Okay, so let's do 2 of those. Oh, it smells great up here. Okay, and that would be enough all by itself. But because we're about healing our gut right now, we're going to take great care to eat well and to avoid some of the things that are going to hinder your healing. Like hydrogenated oils and greasy fried foods. And let's see, I need a 1/2 teaspoon. Oh, here we go. That's what I was looking for. Okay, so I'm going to do a 1/2 teaspoon of the Firm Plus. This is something else I want you to take the time to pick up the jar and read that. Yeah, actually, we can do a teaspoon since we're doubling. It would be, yeah, the Firm Plus is whole foods with 13 strains of probiotics in it. And it is very, very healing to your digestive tract. And we will, the recommendation on the jar is that you start with just 1/8 teaspoon morning and evening, and then you can work up gradually to a 1/2 teaspoon. You don't have to worry about getting too much because it's divided between all of us. But very healing to the gut, to the digestive system. And Sue tells of celiacs who have used this for a year, and then at the end of a year's time, if they accidentally get a little gluten, it doesn't lay them flat anymore. So not that you would intentionally, if you have celiac disease, choose to do that, but very, very healing. And then we also carry yogurt starter and kefir starter, those good live active bacteria to keep that healthy, friendly flora in your digestive tract, and again, just to heal that whole process. Yes, ma'am. Diatomaceous earth? No. Yeah, don't eat that. No. No, we don't sell that, and we don't use it. Thank you. That's the next thing I want to highlight for you. This is sweet wheat, and just a 1/2 teaspoon of sweet wheat is equivalent to 1.5 pounds of fresh organic vegetables. So you're getting your fruits and your veggies in this one smoothie. And because we've added the Firm Plus and the sweet wheat, this is going to be such an energy booster, a wonderful way to start your day. So let's blend. And it's just a matter of blending it sufficiently to get the fruit broken up and to get it smooth. You're making a smoothie. That's probably sufficient right there. We'll take a peek. Smells good. All right, ladies, I'm going to let you take this over and serve, and thank you very much. Sweet wheat does contain wheatgrass. No, it's gluten-free. Yeah. Yeah, no worries there. So you can see in your recipe whether you're getting what the ingredients are. And if I have made an alternative to that, I will let you know for the ones that already contain some dairy or some egg. And what was the other thing? Corn? There's no corn in anything we're doing today, so you're safe on that one. We won't really discuss it further. And then I'll mention to you, well, I'm going to actually save that. There's a bread flour mix that we'll discuss when we get to loading the zoharishi. Now, I don't want to disappoint those of you who really like your structure. I really like structure, okay? But due to the need for yeast breads to rise, we actually need to do some things out of order today. So I'll let you know what recipe that we're actually working on, and if you'll just hang in there with me. The first thing that I want to make for you are whipping cream biscuits. And for my gluten-free, dairy-free, egg-free folks, I have made some muffins. And so you'll have that as you'll have dairy-free chocolate chip muffins for your alternative. And what we might do, ladies, when you just get to a place where you're in between serving something, is maybe grab some of those color, we just need a way to know who it is that can't have those. So we've got some index cards, but if you already know, then that's great. I just want to make sure we keep them straight, or they keep us straight, actually. Okay, so this recipe, I replaced the biscuit recipe that I have used in the last couple of bread and rolls classes with the whipping cream biscuits, because I found them easier to whip up, more delicious, and the added benefit of that they're very easy to freeze and pull out and bake later. So the little plate that I have in front of me is from the first trial run last week, and this is a little batch that I froze and pulled out just before you got here this morning. They need to thaw about 35 minutes before you pop them in the oven, and these are going to have to go on something other than a paper plate as well. Let me grab us a actually, I think I'm going to use this little pizza pan because it's not that many of them. So we'll transfer these. I'll go ahead and get these baking, and then we'll mix up a fresh batch. And I want you to taste it both ways. You'll find that, or you may know, that with gluten-free bread and rolls, more so than with wheat bread and rolls, They're just not as great and wonderful in the following days. They're so much better fresh from the oven, and so I have a couple of recipes for you that really capitalize on that fact, and this is one of them. So let's see if we've got an oven preheated. These need to bake at, this is the one I was setting for 500. These need to bake at 500 for about 9 minutes. I can't tell if it's hot enough. Okay, I think it is. Okay. I'm sorry for that delay. We've struggled some with our ovens, and I didn't want to put it in a cold oven. Now I'm going to use my little timer and set for those 9 minutes. And this little egg timer is fantastic. And if you or a cook that you know and love has arthritis or some sort of pain in their hands, they'll find this much easier to use. Children in the kitchen, it's great for that as well. But it's really good for me. I like the simplicity of it. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Sure. Okay, that's a great question. Let's answer that for everybody. Okay. She's asking about segregation of your kitchen items so that the person who cannot have wheat flour and gluten of any kind isn't contaminated, or your utensils you're not cross contaminating. And so the mill needs to remain separate. Now let me qualify that, because right in our population today we have thousands of people eating a gluten-free diet, many of them knowing from the outset that this is temporary. I'm doing this for a season. It's something that a friend or my healthcare provider is recommending that I try to see if some of my health issues level out. Fine. In your case, you weren't diagnosed with celiac disease. Celiacs have an inability to digest a particular protein that is in the wheat. So for that person, any kind of glutinous grain in the same flour mill is going to get, even a very small amount, is going to give them problems. It's going to make them feel very bad for a day or two or more, you know. So yeah, you don't want to share a mill in that case. However, I want to highlight for you while we're on this subject that if you think you're sensitive to wheat and so you're giving it up for a while, then you could conceivably share a grain mill, but you're going to find yourself needing to run another grain through it, perhaps corn, or my recommendation would just be buy a cheap bag of white rice at the grocery store, because you're just going to throw the flour away. And in my estimation, that's about all it's good for. So, you know, it's cheap. You don't want to waste your good whole grains that you are going to eat. So, but you could, what we did today, we had a circumstance where we needed to do exactly that. So we are making out in the store. Ashley has prepared for a loaf in the Zoharushi Virtuoso model, a loaf of spelt bread. So it's out there kneading and rising as we speak, and it will be baked and ready for you to sample later on. Now, some of you don't need to go sample that, some of you may not feel comfortable sampling that, but let me explain a little bit further. The spelt does not, although it's wheat and it is not gluten-free technically, or it's just not gluten-free, it does not contain that specific protein that celiacs cannot digest, okay? The way that it is handled here in our warehouse as far as the packaging, spelt does go through the same hopper that the wheat and barley and all that go through. Now, we are diligent to blow it out in between every different grain that we do, but it does go through the same hopper, so I want you to know that. So if you're a celiac in the room, I don't really recommend that you try this loaf of spelt bread, okay? But most of you can try the spelt bread, and here's why. Because, like I said, it does not contain that strain of gluten that you may have grown sensitive to. And why is everybody sensitive to gluten right now? Why are so many people? It has really become a catchphrase in the United States right now. And one reason, one very obvious reason, is the diet that we have been eating for at least a century now. And that diet is full of white flour, which is nothing but gluten and starch. And then we have been eating that processed further so that the bakeries are adding additional gluten, and they don't even have to list that as part of the flour. It's not. It's just, you know, considered another ingredient. But anyway, you'll find. I mean, turn over any loaf of bread, you're going to find the gluten, and then those dough enhancers that they use. They're chemical laden, so you're lacking the fiber needed to keep things swept clean and to give you that boost of B vitamins that happens. There's an exchange that takes place in the gut during digestion. You're missing out on that energy when you don't eat a high fiber diet. But most of Americans aren't eating their fresh fruits and vegetables anymore either, you know. So just for that reason, because we eat such a poor diet, or, you know, America at large, of course, it's just become a very common thing. So back to spelt. Spelt is one of 3 ancient grains that we carry that are all strains of wheat, but they're ancient varieties. We sell them only organic. They've never been genetically modified. You can feel good about serving those. Those 3 are spelt, kamut, and emmer, E-M-M-E-R. The spelt, though, because it does not contain that particular protein, oftentimes wheat intolerant people can handle spelt very well. And if that's the case, you just need a little extra flour in the recipes that call for wheat, and you just keep right on rolling along. You don't even need special recipes. It's 1 1/4 cups for each cup called for. That's all you need to know. So we made spelt bread for you. I couldn't run the spelt through my gluten-free only mill, so Ashley took a couple of cups of rice, and we had a mill that we had, you know, cleaned, and a flour canister that had been washed and dried, just the not the tube part, okay? But we ran a couple of cups of rice through that. She threw that flour away, then she milled the spelt flour for the spelt bread. The spelt bread does not have dairy. It does not. We omitted the egg that's in the recipe. There should be a stack of the recipes next to the bread out there. And then I also made available, for those of you who need it, our egg substitutions recipe. Several options on there. The one that I used in your Zoloaf is actually the flaxseed binder. And then a brief, I don't know if I'd call it an article, but just a paragraph from Sue on the subject of spelt. So that was a mouthful, but now you know that's out there. When it's ready, it'll be served out in the store, not here in our gluten-free class. So a lot of recipes are going to call for eggs, and eggs have, you know, in addition to their nutritional value, in the breads they're going to add some softness, and they serve as a binder, so they're good for the texture of gluten-free breads and rolls. Why don't we whip up our whipping cream biscuits, and I have that measured out, which it's this one. Nope, brown and serve rolls. Here we go. All right. Make myself a little room here. So, will you check the biscuits? They should be. If they're golden brown, we're going to call them ready. Now, remember as you taste this, she's going to, okay, let's do. I'm not certain that the oven was all the way up to 500, so we may have that issue that we're also considering. I'm going to have to, I'm itching my nose. I'm going to have to wash my hands. I just want to remind you, as she serves these warm biscuits, that these were the ones that were made last week and frozen, and we've pulled them out for you. So I'm excited about offering that because, like we said, the gluten-free is so nice right out of the oven. And so you're going to get to, I want you to know, since we have that opportunity, you'll get to actually try it both ways, fresh made and baked, and the frozen. So what we need is 1/3 cup, 1/2 cup each, millet, amaranth, and buckwheat flour, and okay. It looks like I didn't finish out measuring this one, so let me grab, I'll just do these right into here. We're going to measure our starches. All right. I'm going to fudge a little because I know that the millet is in the top of here. It doesn't look like I measured my millet. Crazy. Crazy. Okay, so that's easily fixed.
Here's the biscuit.
All right. Now, I did make these mini so that I just thought they were cute that way, but also because I was serving a crowd, I wanted to be able for y'all to have a larger portion, and I thought, you know, depending on registration size, we need to see how many are here today. I think this recipe makes about 40 biscuits, but so hopefully you might even get a whole biscuit later. Woohoo! So let's do. I know the last thing that I measured here was the millet, so it should be right on top, and I'm just gonna get that flour. So 1/2 cup of that. And then we've got our other whole grains, some buckwheat and some amaranth. And in this case, as with a lot of recipes, we're just going to add our dry ingredients first and combine those. In this little cup, I have 3 things. I've got my xanthan gum, my baking soda, and my salt. So they all go in. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a great idea, or a great question, because I didn't individually go over your starches, and there are some things I want to tell you about some of these ingredients. And her question is, what is the xanthan gum and what does that do? It is actually what's going to replace the gluten as a binder and something to, gluten has a lot of elasticity and gives wheat bread's structure, and so that's what we're looking for the xanthan gum to do. Xanthan gum must be measured very, very carefully. If you put too much in what you're baking, it will shrink. After it's made, it'll just get smaller and smaller, tighter, and if you don't put enough, then you won't have that structure, and things will just fall apart and crumble quite a bit on you. So, you know, it's I mean, it's from a plant, but I'll have to look back at the package. Yeah, I've kind of forgotten. Then this is a tablespoon of the honey granules. Honey granules, we've also called these sucanat with honey or honey crystals. So you might see that in Sue's recipe collection. But this is your white sugar replacement, a granular sweetener. So that goes in, and now I'm just going to give those a stir to combine. I haven't tried substituting honey in this recipe, but usually you would substitute half as much honey in a recipe that was calling for sugar and make no other changes. So let's see, here's my whipping cream. Now for these biscuits, we're going to use the heavy whipping cream, and you want to make sure that the cream is cold. And we need 1.5 cups. I do want to point out that it would be fine to substitute sorghum, which, by the way, we will have soon. That's the only grain that's in your list that I don't have in stock for you to buy today, but we will be getting that. Okay, so 1.5 cups of cold cream. And then I'm going to start out with my whisk. And then I'll have to switch to a spatula. Thanks. Okay. Did I? You know what I didn't do is my starches. Yeah. Y'all got to keep me in line. In most of the recipes, I did not, there's no yeast in this one, but in the yeast recipes, I intentionally didn't measure that yet. So, yeah, we need our starches. Well, right. The important thing to realize here is when you're milling your whole grains fresh yourself, you have the opportunity to get those fibers in, and coconut flour is a great high fiber for keeping blood sugar level, and substituting it in a recipe, you want to be sure and in your handout, so you don't have to write this down and memorize it. I've given this information to you. In your handout, below all the grains is coconut flour. And I tell you there that you can generally substitute 20%, for 20% of the flour in the recipe, you can substitute coconut flour. And when you do that, you need to increase your liquid by that same amount. So if you take out 1/4 cup of the flour in the recipe and put 1/4 cup of the coconut flour in its place, then you add 1/4 cup of liquid as well. But you still, in a lot of these recipes, yes, you must use the starches as well. Okay, and I want to work quickly here. Let's see. No, Sharon's going to tell you one point about the coconut flour. Go ahead. Uh-huh. Mm. So don't start mixing it up and then let it sit. We had this experience actually when we were making the blueberry muffins, and it was my first trial with any coconut. We had just gotten it in, and I was so excited to try it, but I hadn't read up on it, so I didn't realize that it was going to require the additional liquid. But boy, that was evident when we started to stir the muffin batter up. You know, it was just so dry, and we're looking at one another like, we measure, you know, I watched you measure, I know you got this right, you know. And so, and we did add more, I think we were using rice milk at the time, so we did add more liquid, but we just hadn't learned the rules of thumb. And she's so right, what Sharon was explaining, that if the batter sits there for a little bit, that coconut flour just seems to continue to, it's so high fiber, which is a wonderful quality, but it will soak up your liquids. So we actually had to add more, you know, after it sat there for a couple minutes and we hadn't scooped them out yet, we actually had to go back and add some more rice milk to it. Now we know why. Uh-huh. Was it all coconut flour? Uh-huh. Okay. You probably needed some xanthan gum or some, you know, a binder in there of some type. Xanthan gum would have helped, or one of the egg substitutes, or even just eggs. Oh, you already have? Well, there's, I read in one, I'm going to have to switch. Now we've got to add more cream. Speaking of adding more liquids, right? I'm just getting all gluey here. Finishing that thought, though, you already had 3 eggs, but you were using coconut flour, so you could have added like 5 more eggs to that, 4 or 5 more eggs, and that would have done the trick for you. So, you know, when you add the eggs, there, maybe. Okay, so this is one way the Lord keeps us humble. Make mistakes in front of a crowd, right? Okay. Clearly, I need more. I'm questioning now what kind of measuring I did. I must have been, I feel like I was I'm so distracted. Must have been to not know that I hadn't finished putting all my ingredients on this tray yesterday. Oh yeah, this is way normal for me, okay? Let's just see if we can tell when we get it to the right consistency. What I'm looking to do is just get it good and combined, and then plop that ball onto a floured surface here. That looks about right. Okay. So my extra bit of flour is going to come in handy because I need to flour my surface. Not tons and tons of flour, because I don't know about you, but I don't like the back of my biscuit to get a mouthful of dry flour. You know what I mean? But we'll need a little bit. I am. Just a damp cloth. It cleans right up. It's no problem. All right. So y'all saw me just wash my hands. Will you allow me to use my finger on this? You know, some of the things we do at home in our own kitchen, we don't realize that might look odd to, to these folks I'm cooking for. It really is. It really, thank you for saying that. She said our hands are one of the best tools in the kitchen. There you go. How about that? Okay, so now I want this dough, the biscuit dough, to be about 1 inch thick. Oh, and it's a nice texture. Feels good. Yeah, backwards and sideways. Okay, so that looks to be somewhat even. Can I get one of you to drag out a baking sheet for me to put these biscuits on? Probably one of those small pizza pans would be big enough. Yeah, that'll be great. And then that can go in the fridge, please, ma'am. All right. We have these awesome biscuit cookie cutters, and so you have a wonderful array of sizes to choose from here. Once again, I'm going to go with the little minis and then give it a shake. They'll come right out. The pan that I'm using today is one of our USA pans, and these have a wonderful clear, whoa, throw in that one, silicone finish. I'm just here for comic relief, okay? A wonderful clear, there you go. That didn't happen to me before. But yeah, now if I try, I couldn't do it, right? But this clear silicone finish, nothing sticks to it. So when we go to take these biscuits out of the oven in a few minutes, we have to be careful not to move too quickly, or they will actually go flying across the room. Ashley can tell you she was removing pizza one time, soon after we got these pans, I think, and the hot pad or whatever that she was using, either I don't know if it had a hole in it or if how she had picked it up, her finger touched the pan, and so she quickly was trying to get that to a place where she could sit it down, but when she turned, it came right here, and had the marble countertop not been cold, it would have just kept going to the front row, but I think because the counter was cold, it stopped it there. So it's wonderful that nothing sticks to it. We'll try not to sling the biscuits to the front row, though, when we take them out of the oven. Okay. Let me see if I can get Ashley to finish this process here. I know they're enjoying my clowning, but there you go.
Can I have a scoop of this?
You may. And you'll see once she cuts out what's there, you do have to regroup your dough, pat it even again, and continue to do that process. So that's what we'll do, and then these are going to bake 500 for 9 minutes, and I hope you enjoy them. I think they're wonderful. Now the ladies serving will have, we've got honey, a couple of varieties of honey. I've got the sage and the buckwheat out for you, and then we also have some whipped honeys in varieties. Those whipped honeys have maybe one other ingredient. The strawberry whipped honey has strawberries and honey. And it's whipped to a silky, creamy, wonderful texture. So if you'd like to try something like that on your bread or roll or biscuit later, we invite you to do that. She'll have those available up here. We won't actually be passing those with the whole thing. Now I'm going to wash my hands, and we'll get ready for another recipe. Okay, I have not. Her question is, have we used whole milk rather than whipping cream? And what was the difference? How did that turn out? Ashley's done that in wheat biscuits.
Yeah, just using regular, the soft white. They were not nearly as flaky, and it's because of the fat content. It's not as high in the whole milk as it is in the heavy whipping cream. And just like with when you cut in butter into a biscuit recipe, you're wanting that layer of fat to be completely encased in flour, and that's what gives it that flaky texture.
Now, before we leave the biscuit recipe, I just want to tell you, when you make this up, it's going to make about 40 of these little mini biscuits. Only bake what you want to serve immediately, freeze the rest, and then you can pull those out a few at a time as you need them. Let them thaw 30-35 minutes, pop them in the oven, and they're ready in 9 minutes. Okay? Next, I want to gather up what we need for the brown and serve rolls. Let me just clear a little bit of this away, and I'm going to keep my flour right here. Okay, on the xanthan gum, while we have just a moment here, sure. I had glasses here a moment ago. Oh, that's much better. Okay. Xanthan gum is made from the outer layer of a tiny inactive bacterium called Xanthomonas capistris. I don't know. It's a wonderful thickener, just kind of all-purpose thickener. You know, sometimes folks who aren't required to eat gluten-free just use it to thicken their gravies and sauces and that sort of thing. But because it can hold your baked goods together, we use it for that structure. So it's a good substitute for gluten in our gluten-free baking, and a little bit goes a long way. So this one bag, you know, ought to last you several months, depending on how much baking you're doing. But to answer someone's question, that's what it is and where it's made from. No, you're doing great. Storage, Bob's Red Mill recommends that you keep it refrigerated, and so you probably want to, you know, find some mason jars or some sort of little containers. I like these because they pop open. I broke one of them though, so I've replaced it with another one of these for all the starches. And then and we just have a spot in the fridge back there where we keep those gluten-free items so that I can get to them, you know, they're handy. But we do keep them all refrigerated. And your whole grains will not need to be refrigerated, but they do need to be stored in a cool, dry location. And while I'm on that subject, let me point out what you see here is a 2-pound baggie of, I think that might be quinoa on the right, on the excuse me, on my right. The bag to the left of that has a little less than 2 pounds of amaranth. I needed half a cup of flour, so I used it. But those come in 2-pound bags, which is great for a trial size. So if you think, well, I want to go home and try making some things with the spelt, you could certainly just get a 2-pound bag or a little 1-gallon pail to do that. The 1-gallon pail is this size. I've got my millet in that size, so 7 pounds of millet is in this 1-gallon pail. And then if you'll notice, over here to my left, we also have 6-gallon buckets of all these wonderful grains. The exception to that right now is the Teff. I've got the Teff in a small bag like this. And the Teff is actually the smallest grain in the world. nice dark brown color. We're going to make some easy Teff bread in a little bit, and so you'll get a good up close and personal look at the Teff. In fact, I have some Teff bread on display for you right there, but I want to hold off discussing it further until we get to that recipe. What I have for you now are brown and serve rolls, and hopefully we have all the ingredients measured this time. That would just make my life easier. And I love these for their convenience, but I am excited to tell you that when I was in the kitchen testing these for the first time and took them around to be tasted, I got comments like, well, these are nice and soft in the middle, or this tastes good, or is this gluten-free? And, you know, really surprised. And then one person tasted the first one, said, I would serve these. I would serve these. And as she grabbed a second one off my tray. So, you know, that just makes me excited to present it to you, because that tells me that even if someone didn't have to eat gluten-free, they might like them. So hopefully you will as well. Now, we're going to need an oven at 275. Could I get you to adjust this lower temperature to that for me? No, the lower oven should be on proof, and the upper oven, if you'll set it for 285, maybe it'll reach 275, which is what we need. So for this, I'm just going to grab a mixing bowl. And a sip of water. And our dry ingredients are going in. Then my wet ingredients are going in the electric mixer. So this probably might be a bigger bowl than I actually really must have, but this is the millet flour. I can tell it apart from the oat flour just by the color. You see how yellow the millet flour is? And this is the oat flour on the right. Now, I will tell you, I made your oat flour from the Bob's gluten-free, certified gluten-free steel cut oat. And I'm actually able to run that through the mill, but not the rolled oats. So in the Bob's Red Mill, we have the certified gluten-free. He's gone to the expense to make sure his is tested and certified gluten-free for you. So if you are cooking for someone with celiac disease, or you are celiac yourself, then you want to use those. And if not, if you're just avoiding gluten for a season, or you think you have a sensitivity to wheat and gluten, then, you know, I'm comfortable saying I think you'd be fine just using our oat groats and our rolled oat. But that's a determination you need to, a decision you need to make yourself. But that's just food for thought there. Again, so we've got the millet, we've got the oat flour, and then in this bowl I have, let me go ahead and dump those in. In this bowl I've got my starches just measured one on top of the other. And even if I had those in separate bowls, I wouldn't be able to distinguish one from the other. And the starches are starches. Now I will say, of the three starches that we're using, the tapioca, the arrowroot, and the potato starch, arrowroot is my number one favorite, followed by the tapioca. And okay, that's a good question. Could you use all of one of those instead of measuring some of each? Because I haven't had the opportunity to test that theory, I'm not going to tell you to try that. Each of these does have a little bit different properties. You're going to find them, you know, called for in conjunction with one another in a lot of recipes. There are a few recipes where they'll only call for one or two, and definitely, you know, I'm I'm of the opinion that if you ran out of potato starch, that you could just, you're using 2/3 cup of each, so I would use an additional 1 cup of the other two, but I haven't tried it, so I can't tell you whether that's going to work successfully or not. Okay, great. Sharon, see, Sharon's actually far more of an expert, I think. She's just been testing recipes a whole lot longer. So I want to defer to you on that, and then I'll just repeat with the microphone if you'll speak to the starches and substitutions. Okay. Great. Well, thank you. See, so I hadn't had the opportunity to experiment, but Sharon's actually referred to herself as mad scientist in the kitchen. She has done lots of experimentation, and she agrees that arrowroot is her top pick, and tapioca starch or tapioca flour, same thing. Potato starch, potato flour, not the same. Tapioca flour, tapioca starch, exactly the same. But the arrowroot, the other reason I love the arrowroot, not only is it a whole food coming directly from that plant ground up, but it is the easiest starch to digest. So I like it for both of those reasons. Now we've got a couple of other dry ingredients we want to stir in with this, and we are making brown and serve rolls, so I just want you in the right place in your handout, and then y'all make sure I put everything in, okay? So xanthan gum. And this is 1/4 cup of the honey granules that we discussed earlier. And now I'm going to grab my yeast from the refrigerator. Our yeast comes in a nice vacuum seal packet, which can store in your pantry just at room temperature. But once you open that packet, you must store your yeast in either the refrigerator or the freezer. Doesn't matter which. If you have a little spot on your freezer door, put it in a canister or a mason jar or whatever, and put it on the freezer door. If you have a spot in the refrigerator, that's fine. And either way, you do not need to bring it up to room temperature before you start your baking. And this is instant yeast. So in your recipes, it can be added right along with the flour. There's no need to do that extra step of proofing that's required with active dry yeast. And let me give you a rule of thumb, because some recipes, if you have some favorite recipes at home or in other cookbooks, they may call for a packet of active dry yeast. And I've already told you, you don't have to do that step of softening it in the warm water, but you'll just add it with the flour, or if you're loading a bread machine, it goes on top. But you'll use 2 teaspoons of the instant yeast for each packet of active dry yeast called for, which is actually a little more than, it's probably 2.5, 2 1/4 or 2.5 teaspoons in volume. So you can always get by with a little bit less of the instant yeast. Our recipe is calling for 2 teaspoons. So let me turn, my Flip It has a 1/2 teaspoon on this side and 1 teaspoon on this side. And so we're going to do 2 teaspoons. Be sure that you level off your measuring. And, you know, once again, more important than, is this for our biscuits? They're behind me, okay. More important than any wheat cooking you've ever done, you must measure accurately with your gluten-free baking. So, yes, the millet, I ran through the mill. We're going to go over the process of milling and talk about the mill a little bit more. When we get to the Teff bread, I'll mill that in front of you. Okay, so those are combined. I want to pull my mixer forward. And then my other wet ingredients are 3/4 cup water and 3/4 cup milk. Now this one already contains egg and butter, so I'm not going to worry about doing it Dairy-free. Oh, well, although I could. I've got almond milk and rice milk in the fridge. So are there some that can't have dairy, but you can have the egg and the butter? Yeah? Okay, well, we'll just do the almond milk then. Okay, so back to this. I need 3/4 cup of water, and then we'll add 3/4 cup of milk. Why didn't I sift my flour? Well, there's no reason to sift your fresh milled whole grain. You're going to use all of it. In the canister itself, you'll see me tip the canister and kind of shake it all to one side. I might, if I've got a good bit of flour in there, I might stir it a little bit, especially if I'm not going to use every last bit of the flour, just to make sure I'm getting the fiber mixed back in with the flour. But no, there's no need to sift. Mm-mm. Okay, grab this, measure 3/4 cup, and then I'm going to pull the assistant mixer forward. Yeah. And we'll get the wet ingredients first. This has been, for as long as the Beckers have been in business, our favorite mixer. Oh. And there are several reasons for that. It's the largest at-home capacity mixer. So you can double and triple and quadruple some of your recipes and do a whole lot at one time. One of my personal favorite things about this mixer is the big open stainless steel bowl. It's so easy to add what you need. I like that the speed dial is almost infinite in the variations of speed from low to high, and then the automatic timer. I can set it for up to 12 minutes of mixing, and it will click off that time and stop on its own. So it almost does everything for you, and so it's just convenient and easy to use. Let's make sure I'm not sure my butter is soft enough. Could I get just a few seconds on a very low power to soften that? The warehouse is a little bit cool, so even though it's been sitting out, it's still slightly firm. And in this mixer, your butter, if you're doing a cake or a recipe that calls for butter and we're whipping that in, it does need to be soft. You can't, the hard butter is kind of basically stay in a clump. But another favorite feature, the scraper. The scraper is going to remain at the side of the bowl, constantly scraping this bowl as the bowl turns and as I'm mixing or kneading whatever it is. And so you never have to stop in the middle of a recipe to scrape the bowl yourself. And that is a very wonderful, convenient feature. Thank you. You can just dump it right in. Okay, so now I'm getting my wet ingredients into the electric mixer, and I'm just going to mix that on low speed for a couple of minutes to get things well combined. Then we'll start getting our flour in. And there's a difference between, how many of you have cooked with wheat in the past? And you've mixed and kneaded some wheat bread dough. Okay. There's actually a kneading process that needs to happen there, and that in order to have a successful loaf where you're developing that gluten. Let me see the front here for a second. And I'm going to turn it to low speed when I start with my liquids in the bowl so that they don't all end up in my hair. Although I know that would be funny, but we'd have to remeasure and start over, and I don't have time for that. So anyway, so we're going to start on low speed, and I'll go ahead and get the egg in. I cracked it over there to make sure I didn't feed you a shell. Okay, I started down one tray. Oh, just the fact that your gluten-free does not require kneading. We're going to mix it, and we're going to mix it, combine it, almost whip it. What we're looking to do here is get it to lighten the texture somewhat by our mixing method, and it will whip a little air into it. Okay, so once it starts going, then I'm safe to increase the speed a little bit. And you see the roller is against the side of the bowl. It's actually the bowl that's turning the roller right now. I'm going to, this is a spring-loaded arm, by the way, and it can move all the way to the center. And as you're making garlic mashed potatoes in this bowl, that is going to be moving back and forth and mixing things for you. But in this recipe, I'm going to move it just a little off the side of the bowl, tighten the tension on this knob. Well, I didn't do that either, did I? There we go. Because I want a little bit of it to be able to scoot back there. And now I'm going to go ahead and get half of my flour in. Double check that this is what I mean to do. Okay. And so just getting it well combined, we'll go ahead and add about half the flour and give it a minute or two to mix in and combine. And with this mixer and this type of a recipe, oh goody, show us.
There's the biscuit.
There are your biscuits. And I want you to notice they weren't all touching when she sat them out, but they do expand and they do rise up as they bake. And so you'll have some soft sides and some little crispy tops. Hope you enjoy those. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I started to say with this mixer, you can, you can push, you can push this to the center. Just if there happens to be something in the middle of the bowl that's not getting mixed. I see for some reason the roller's caught my flour. Okay, that looks pretty well mixed. I'm comfortable at this point adding the balance of the flour. And I did put the yeast, I got the yeast out, but did I measure any? Did I? Okay, some of you are saying yes and some are saying no. You're sure I did? Okay. I'm going with it then. That's the hazard of talking. I'm so prone to forget what I just did. Okay. So, can you see what's happening here? Nope. Let me give you a better view. Okay. Jim's going to give you a better view. Oh, that was a fun ride, huh? Okay, and I'm actually going to increase my speed just a little, and then I want to hear your question. And it should click off on its own in just a minute there. And what was your question over here? If you wanted to omit the yeast, what would you use as a substitute? The best you could do is something like, and I haven't experimented and actually done this yet, but the best I know would be to do like baking powder, baking soda. So you have, in the arena of baking, you have two categories. You have your yeast bread offerings, where the rising agent is that yeast. And then you have what we call quick breads. Quick breads would be something like banana bread, the biscuits that don't require any yeast. Their leavener is going to be baking soda, baking powder. So I haven't done any experimentation to try to make this without yeast, but if you do, I want to know your results. And let me tell you while I'm thinking, because I want you to have this email address, I want all of you to have the email address for the help desk here, which is support, S-U-P-P-O-R-T, @breadbeckers.com. And, you know, if you happen to be at our website, contact us is a link that you can easily get to. But if you just want to send me an email, if you do any experimenting with the recipes that I've given you and you get some great results, we want to know about it because we want to share that with other customers. And so that I would really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, now that we're passing biscuits, for those of you who could not have the dairy, I have a treat. And I don't have enough for everyone who can have dairy. So, but what this is, I have made for you egg-free, dairy-free, gluten-free chocolate.
They all took a biscuit anyway.
What?
I know. I didn't make them. They were like, it's okay.
They just had, you just had to try it once. Okay. Well, okay. Okay, I just hope you feel well tomorrow. Yes, but they will pass these for us. And I did find that it is important to use the muffin liner when you do the gluten-free muffins. And I apologize, I didn't have time to remake them, but I left out the flaxseed binder, so they're gonna be a little bit crumbly. And what I'm gonna ask is if you would deliver this with a spoon so that they can, in case it's difficult to get out or in case it's crumbly. Okay, so 2 spoons so they can share it with their neighbor, she says. So the chocolate chips that I used in that recipe are by Enjoy Life. They're the mini chocolate chips. The mini chocolate chips are gonna be much easier to use in your gluten-free baking than the full-size chocolate chips in my experience. They're just not as heavy, but that's what I used. I used 1 cup, and if you love the recipe, I'll share it for you. I forgot to print some off for you in advance, but just email me and I will be happy to send it to you as an attachment, okay? Let me know what you think. Okay, any comments about the biscuits? Awesome. She said, very good, you would not feel deprived. And see, I think that's important. So at this point, what I want to do is begin to scoop the brown and serve rolls. Sharon, I need the mini muffin pans below the already made brown and serve rolls, but bring the rolls with you as well, please. Thank you. So what we're gonna do, I should have already baked the ready ones. No, they need to be in this, but we have, I think we have some more minis that may not be the USA pans.
Okay.
So if you want to check behind me there while we do something else. Okay, now the brown and serve rolls. I hope you love them as much as we all did. But again, as I alluded to earlier, one of the reasons that I'm excited about this recipe is because it's another one that enables you to make some gluten-free breads ahead that you can then pull out and serve warm on the spot. And so it's convenient for busy schedules, but it's also more delicious because of that option. So I'm going to pull the pin out, get my roller, release that. Could you make hamburger bun? I don't see why not. You're just going to do that on a different shape pan. And the USA actually offers this seems a little thinner to me right now. The USA actually offers a pan that's going to assist you in doing that. Now, your gluten-free is not going to, come way up to the top of that, but that will give it a form to follow, and you'll be able to slice it. Yeah, these have a nice soft interior texture, so I don't see why not. Sure. Yeah, what we want to do for you is I want to show you the brown and serve rolls that I made previously. And what we'll do, let's see, these these that have been made, my recommendation is first of all, let me clarify. When you make them initially, as you're reading in your recipe, you bake these low and slow, and you do not brown them. So they stay soft, they just barely start to turn color. So you're gonna see these, they're very fair complected. And then when you're ready to serve them, can you see that? When you're ready to serve them, you just pop them back in the pan that you rose and baked them in the first place. And then they're gonna run in the oven for 8 to 10 minutes at 400 degrees. So I wanna fill this up with these. Aren't they cute? They all have a little character, how the top looks a little different on each one. Right, and so that's the idea. Brown them when you're ready to serve them. Brown and serve rolls. So I'm gonna fill this up. Is one of the ovens at 400, or could you persuade it to be? Could you make these larger? Certainly. I wouldn't go bigger than a muffin tin, just a standard muffin tin. But you could make them a little bit larger, and you could do, she's going to try the hamburger buns. I think that's a great idea. We always can think of one more thing we want to try with that. And the texture is nice, and they were pretty easy to work with. So I think that you'll have success, but I just haven't done that yet myself.
Could you use that same technique for brown and serve for regular bread?
Sure.
Like cook them a little bit and then put them in the freezer?
Yes. Yes. Her question is, if I'm also baking regular bread, could I use the brown and serve technique on those rolls? Sure. You just bake it, just follow these baking instructions, low and slow initially. That one's a itty bitty. I'm going to put a full size in its place. Okay. And really, here we go. Awesome. I'm going to let Sharon, if you would transfer those from there to there, because I'm gonna require both of these pans for this dough. And then once we're preheated, it's fine for those to go right in. Yes, please. And then I have more here.
Okay. Yep, gotcha.
Awesome. Okay, we're coordinating here. I'm gonna stick my yeast back in the refrigerator. Your yeast does begin to die as it sits at room temperature. It's not an immediate thing, but if you leave it out on the kitchen counter and go off all day and come back and realize, I've left it out, don't throw it away if you've only done that one time. It probably will still be good for months to come, but it begins to die, and it's a process. And if you left it just in the pantry for 2 or 3 weeks, but you were using it during that time, you would find that things would rise less and less until you had no success at all. So something to be alert to, and a little pitfall you can avoid just by knowing the rules. Once it preheats to 400, but they have a bottom and a top. Okay, now the only thing is the pan that we're warming them in, it has a dark no-stick finish, so they're probably going to be kind of crispy and darker on the bottom. Some of you may find that to be something you really like and prefer, and others may want theirs to be a little lighter. If you use the USA pans, they're not going to over brown. Yeah, I'm just going to do a few to show them, and then I'm going to let you have this. And what will happen to these next, I want to point out this is our cookie scoop. Perfectly fits this size, so it's very convenient. But I'm going to use this to fill these. And you notice I didn't have to spray my pan. Nothing sticks to these USA pans. It's not a necessary step to spray them in advance. Do you see that this is kind of that it's very moist? It's sort of a wet batter looking mix. And it's actually just slightly wetter than it was the last couple of times I made them. So I may have been a little heavy-handed on my liquids when I measured those just a minute ago. Most likely that is exactly the difference that we see. So I'm going to let Sharon continue to scoop these out for me, and then once they're all scooped out, if you'll put them in the lower oven to proof at 100. If you can set your oven to 100 for proofing, then that's what I highly recommend that you do for rising all of the breads that we're making today, because then you have that controlled environment and you'll have some guess or guesstimate, some idea of what your rising time ought to be. Ashley, can I give you that? I think she may need both of those. Poofy? Oh, proof, P-R-O-O-F. I'm proofing them in the oven. Our electronic ovens allow us to set them for the precise temperature that we want, so I can set it for 100 degrees. Yeast breads like it warm and cozy, but no hotter than you could tolerate. So if you're rising it hotter than is comfortable to you, more than really you want to aim for, 90, 100, and no more. If you put it in an oven that's a good bit warmer than that, you're just going to kill your yeast, and it will not, the rolls won't rise. For these rolls, I think that last time it took close to 45 minutes for them to proof, 30 to 45, if I remember correctly, but we'll see.
Your oven is ready to bake, to finish baking them whenever you're ready.
Yeah, we want these to go in. Those can go in as long as it's preheated, and then we're going to serve those with herb butter, except for a few. Those need 8 to 10 minutes. And I'll set this. So 8 to 10 minutes at 400 to brown them up. And then what I started to say is we're going to serve those with some herb butter for those of you who want that. Does anybody, I know a few of you, those who can't have dairy, do you avoid butter altogether as well? No? Is there anyone who needs us to omit the herb butter? All right, girls, you can slather away when the time comes. In fact, I'll butter a little bit up here because I want you to see them beforehand. Okay. Just throw them your way. Okay, that's great. Thank you. All right, so any questions about brown and serve rolls in the mini muffin pans with your cookie scoop before we move on? All right. Now, if you'll turn to, it's page 7 of your handout. I know that's not next, but it is next. It's going to be next. Awesome. Okay, so you saw those. She's putting them in the proofer. And why don't we set an oven timer, and we'll peek at them in 30 minutes. They may end up needing 45, but just so we have some idea. Okay. This is a loaf of gluten-free bread that you've frozen? Just wheat bread? Okay. No, actually not. You don't want to... Okay. Yeah, well, let me help you with your wheat bread at a separate time, because the methods and all that really don't translate one to the other. What you know and do for your wheat bread is not what you need to remember when you're... You could, not a loaf, but rolls you could. Rolls or buns, dinner rolls or little mini rolls or buns, you could pre-cook. Yeah, We did say that. So, sure. All right, sometimes I'm just as clear as mud when I'm giving you my answer. So please let me know if I need to clarify, because my heart is to give you exactly what you need to leave here confident that you can go home and make anything that you've had that you really liked today. Okay, so we're moving on to the multigrain bread, Mimi's multigrain bread, and a friend was trying to help us name it, and he says it's marvelous multigrain bread. So you could call it Mimi's marvelous multigrain bread. You could call it Mimi's multigrain bread. You can just call it multigrain bread. We're okay with that. So we're going to be, I don't know why I put the mixer up. I am using it for the next two breads. So what I will need is another mixing bowl. There. Does that have a roller and a scraper inside?
No, but I will find you.
Okay. So we're just going to drop the bowl on. Now, if you needed an extra, sure. Sure. You can buy an extra bowl. There we go.
There you go, madam.
Thank you. You're the best. Okay, so for this, this mixer actually does come with a dough hook, but the only time I'd recommend the dough hook is if you were doing a super stiff artisan bread, and you would only probably be doing that with wheat flour, and it's gonna just be able to handle that really stiff dough best. But for most anything else, roller and scraper. The exception would be if you needed to whip egg whites or whip cream, then you would use the double whisk bowl, which comes standard with your mixer, and it comes with the double beater assembly and goes in like so. It doesn't stay up this high, but anyway, that's the idea. So whipping cream, egg whites, nothing thicker than pancake batter in there. Everything else you're doing in the stainless steel bowl with the roller and the scraper. And then it also comes with this cover for your bowl, which is great when you're rising a batch of dough. If you wanted to, some things you rise in the bowl first and then scoop out, and so that cover is great for that. Or with some of the attachments, it serves as a catch basin for your whatever, for grated cheeses, on and on. Wonderful, great attachments available with this mixer, but we're gonna try to stick to the program and just hang with our bread and rolls right now. So let me show you the blender, the stick blender. This recipe calls for a couple of eggs, and it tells you to whip them. And I found the fastest, easiest way to do that is in 2 seconds with the stick blender right in the little bowl that I break them in. And I actually broke them when I was doing, oftentimes I break them just in this little size bowl rather than this size bowl, and the stick blender still doesn't splash any out. You can do it right in there. So it's just neat, it's handy, and then all I have to do is rinse that piece and go on with life. So I'll go ahead and crack the eggs and do that step. Maybe I should take that one out before I crack the first one, you think? Okay, so 2 eggs, no shells. I don't think so. That's a good question, but I don't know the answer for sure. Okay, so just assemble that, and then I've got an on-off switch at the top followed by turbo. We're not going to do the turbo right now. On is quite enough, and so I'll just place it down in the eggs, give it 2 seconds. They're whipped. That was hard work. Do y'all have a rag? I just need to wipe the sweat from my brow. It may have been too quick. If you blinked, you missed it, right? Sorry, you snooze, you lose. Okay, so we've whipped our eggs. Now, next we add water. Let me make sure I measured the right amount of water. That looks like only 2/3 cup instead of 3/4. Okay, 3/4 cup water. It is now room temperature. I needed warm water for a recipe or two, and the Clower electric kettle just almost instantly can boil your water for you. So I warmed some in that and just measuring my fresh water right out of there. So into the mixer, I'm going to put my whipped eggs, my water, honey, butter, and salt. Is that right? Yes. Slide the bowl out, or the mixer. Oh, Jim, they're asking if you can change the angle so they can see in the mixer. I'm sorry. Don't mean to fuss at you. Okay, so here we go. That was our 2 eggs. That's actually, this recipe calls for warm water, and it is slightly warm. My 2 tablespoons of honey. Now, I did put a splash of olive oil, just an incy bit in the bottom, so that I'd have some hope of my honey coming out. And I'm still probably... Thank you very much. I started to say, I'm still going to have to scrape it out. You know, oh, thank you. She feels at home. That's great. I mean, this is just, true stuff is the funniest, as Jeff Foxworthy says. It's really not. Thank you for saying that. Well, and you see if a goof-off like me can do this and have the breads turn out okay, so can. Let's see. They can go a little browner, yes, please. Okay. So now we have the honey, the warm water, the eggs, and we want the butter and the salt to go in. And my once softened butter, let's see, it's still fairly soft. I think we can deal with it. It's, you know, typically you'll have to just run it in the microwave for just a few seconds on a low power to soften your butter. And if it's a warm summer day, you may not even have to do that if you just sit it out a little bit ahead. Okay, back you go. All right, and this is not a wet ingredient, but I want the salt in now. The Redmond's Real Salt does better to dissolve in the nice warm water. It still has all those natural minerals and nutrients. It's not at all refined or heated or and it doesn't have anything taken out of it. So I really want to recommend that to you along the lines of just your overall health, but also for the healing of the digestive system. It's been particularly helpful to my mom, who has had a lot of high blood pressure issues, but it's also was helpful to me and those who were having upper digestive thing, you know, if the reflux and GERD and that kind of stuff, you'll probably notice a difference when you switch to the salt, because it is not where the store-bought bleached refined salt is acidic and very irritating to your system. The Redmond's Real Salt is not. It's actually alkalizing, and so you'll just find that it's easier to digest. It tastes really good. Once you switch to it, you'll never go back to the other. So once I get flour on my face, it makes me itch. All right, so my butter may not have been quite as warm as I wanted it, but I think we're still okay. I'm gonna move the roller just a little bit off the side of the bowl again as we get our dry ingredients in. And similar to other recipes, I do want to combine my dry ingredients before I start adding them. So I'm just going to grab a small mixing bowl and we will just dump those in. You can see from the list there, we've got a cup of the sorghum flour. We've got millet. That one's the millet. This one's the amaranth. Oh, kind of puffing there. You don't want to dump your starches quickly like that. You saw that little bit of dust from the flour. If you dump the starches, boy, will it get all over you. So in here I've got the potato starch. This one is the xanthan gum. And this is the lecithin. So once again, I've got to grab my yeast. I do store the lecithin typically in the refrigerator. It would be okay at room temperature for 8 months to a year. And we go through ours quickly around here, but it's just handy to have it next to the yeast. That's just what we've grown accustomed to doing. And if you store yours in the refrigerator, then your shelf life is going to be substantially longer than a year. Lecithin and rice bran are gluten-free, yes. If you have, the lecithin is derived from soy, so does anybody have a strong sensitivity to soy? Okay, well, if you did, you could use half as much of the rice bran extract and make no other changes in your recipes. So you may know someone that applies to. Okay, how much yeast? 1.5 teaspoons. That is exactly half a tablespoon. A tablespoon's 3 teaspoons. So I love that this has the half tablespoon measure. And I'm just going to level that off and add it to my dry ingredients. And use my dry whisk to combine those. I may have to come out of this sweater up here next to the ovens. I'm getting toasty. Okay, so I'm going to turn it back on. The directions read to gradually add your flour to the liquids and mix on medium speed for 2 minutes. Then you increase your speed to medium-high. So there again, we're going to try to whip in a little bit of air and fluff to it so that we get a nice light loaf of bread. So I'm going to turn this, make sure my speed's not too high, and we'll turn it on, and I'll set it for about 4 minutes. We'll start in with the flour. Let some of that incorporate and add the rest and increase our speed. I like to get it in there before I start turning up the speed. Ask me how I learned to do that. I was teaching how to make bread one time and turned on the Bosch Universal mixer and didn't realize that it was up on high speed. Oh my goodness. It had water, oil, honey, and eggs down in the bowl, and out it came. So down the sleeve, it was fun. I learned my lesson though, don't we? We learn from the School of Hard Knocks. Okay, we're gonna kick it up a notch, as Emerald says. Go ahead and get this in. Then we're gonna increase the speed even more to try to make it a little bit fluffy. Meanwhile, awesome. Now I'm going to push my roller to the center because there's that little bit of flour that I want to pick up. And now up goes the speed just a bit. And let me grab a 1 pound loaf pan. I want to talk to you about this for just a second. As far as your loaf pans go, I have found with any bread that I'm baking gluten-free that I have better success in the smaller pans than I do in the larger pans. Better success with getting a taller loaf that looks pretty. So this is our Norpro 8-inch pan. It's 8 by 4.5 by 3. 1 pound loaf pan. You could do this loaf in that, or if you like the mini loaf size, these are mini loaf pans, and as you see, we have the connected ones as well, which are convenient for getting in and out of the oven. And so I did, if you'll notice the platter nearest to me, those are Teff bread loaves, which is the recipe we'll do next. But I did them in 3 separate sizes of pans. Let's see how we're looking here. Awesome. There we go. Did them in 3 separate sizes of pans, and just to let you see the difference in how the loaves turn out, and also so that you could gauge you know, what size do you think is going to be comfortable for you if you wanted to make a sandwich on that? You know, is the mini too small? Now, the medium size of those 3 is this mini loaf. The smallest is actually a little bit smaller, and that is a paper loaf pan that we carry. And I don't know that we put those on display for, is there one? Okay, there's a package of those. They come in a package, or they're also sold individually in several sizes. So that's not the only size available, but it's wonderful if you're going to be taking it to give to someone, then you can actually just give it to them in the little pan. I would let it cool a little bit and then run a knife around the edge and make sure it's going to come out of the pan for them. I let it cool in the paper loaves, similar to I do with a regular loaf pan. I'm going to let it cool for a little bit, turn it out, set it on a wire rack. Once it's fully cooled, then it can go back in your little paper pan if you want to present it that way, or you know, bag it up and take it to them that way. But anyway, so 3 different sizes, same loaf. You'll notice on the 1 pound loaf pan that as it cooled, it dipped just slightly on top, but the smaller ones stayed curved and tall on top. So just be aware that smaller pans present a more beautiful loaf, and then it's up to you what size you really want to make and what size you're going to be happy with for your sandwiches. I didn't. We sliced the medium-sized loaf. Do you still have it in a bag over there, Sharon? Let's just lay it on a plate and pass it around. Let them see the sliced. It's the Teff bread, but we also have the multigrain that I just made. So you can maybe just put those side by side and pass them. And then you can just look at that. This we're not going to serve to you. You can handle it. You can touch it all you want to see what the texture's like. Just don't destroy it so the folks after you can have an opportunity as well. So I am going to use some cooking spray on this pan. The dark is the Teff. The dark is the Teff, and the lighter is the multigrain what we've just mixed up is multigrain. What we'll do next is the Teff. And you know, as I'm spraying this, I'm thinking for serving you purposes, it might be easier to slice the smaller loaves. So I'm gonna change my mind and use the mini loaf pans. And I can't remember. I think I got just 2 mini loaves, but we'll see. And in this case, even though it's a USA pan, I just accidentally sprayed it. It probably wasn't necessary. Although with the gluten-free, I'm more cautious to make sure that everything can come out easily because, oh, looky, looky. These are your brown and serve rolls. Now, I made these 5 days ago. So, and they've stayed at room temperature. So let me just back up and tell you that your brown and serve rolls, if you plan to eat them that week within 3 to 5 days of when you've made them, you don't have to freeze them. You can just put them in a storage bag like I did, and then just brown them up when you're ready. If you want to make extra, or it's going to take you longer than the 3 to 5 days to use up what you have, then it's perfectly fine. Thaw them, cool them completely before you put them in your bags. And our bread bags, by the way, are freezer quality bags. You can use them over and over. They're very handy. Zip top freezer bags are also okay to use, but if you do choose to freeze them, just cool them completely before you put them in your freezer bags, and then you can pull out whatever you need at a time, but they have to thaw before you bake them. All right, so I want to, well, they rose. Yeah, they rose. Did you remember when we scooped that wet looking batter into the mini muffin pan? It didn't fill that muffin hole. It wasn't up to the top, but when they rise to double, it's way up above there. And then you bake them at 275 just until they start to turn. And so they get done. They're not dough anymore. They've risen to double. They've been baked low and slow. And it's at that point that you will either store them or freeze them. And then you'll pull them out and brown them. So just remember, brown and serve. You're going to brown it later right when you're ready to serve it. That enables you to serve them hot, fresh from the oven. And right, and so you didn't have to do the preparation right then. Yeah, exactly. It's Italian seasoning and a little bit, I believe, a little bit of basil. Caleb actually made that up a couple of days ago and permitted us to use it. So. This dough, the multigrain dough, okay, she's asking, did I need that for 2 minutes or 4 minutes? The answer is yes. 2 minutes, 2 minutes with half the flour in and a couple more minutes with all the flour in. But I did increase the speed from low to about medium high for that last couple of minutes of mixing. And so it's really mixed, you know, I mean, we'll call it kneading, but we're mixing. Is done? Okay, awesome. We want to show that. Our sandwich loaf that I started in the Zoharushi bread machine for you this morning is complete. So I want you to see it first in the pan. Then they're going to get it out of the pan, let it cool over there, and we'll show it to you again before we slice it up. Can you see that? Now this is a great loaf. This turned out very nice. What we're hoping for, a home run with this, is a 4-inch loaf of the basic sandwich bread. The very similar recipe, the oatmeal sandwich bread that I'm going to be making for you next, and when I show you how to load the pan, you are hoping for a 3.5 to 3 3/4 inch loaf, and that's partly because you're using the coarse ground oat flour in it. That's going to make it a little heavier, but it's a wonderful flavor, so I'm showing you that one too. But anyway, great basic sandwich loaf. That's about how high it looks in the pan. You have to, and she's going to go get it out of the pan. We want to remove the Zo loaves from the pan immediately when they're done. The spelt recipe is available for you, but we've put it on the table next to the bread machine in the store where we're making the spelt bread. Right. Okay, so Let me grab a spoonula, or a switch it actually. All right. See, I really can't chew gum and walk at the same time, so I know Ashley, I think, gets tickled because I think Sue and I are both this way. If we're talking to you, we're talking to you. It's very difficult for me to mix and measure and do all that at the same time. Ashley, however, she's all over it. She can do both and never miss a beat. So, personality difference, I guess. But I have a lot, youth, I have a lot of respect for her because it just boggles my mind that she's able to do that so well. Tuning out, okay. So.
And you get really good at that when you're the oldest son. My children suffer greatly.
Say that again? My goal is that these pans be half full or a little better. And basically I'm just trying to sort of evenly divide my batter, I'll call it, dough, whatever you want to say, between the two mini loaf pans. Now once you get it in there, you see what a mess I'm making here. Once you get it in, you actually need to press it to the corners down there and have it be slightly level or level it off across the top. So I'm filling the corners. Come on over. Okay. Filling the corners and leveling it off.
Which one was this again?
That is basic sandwich bread out of the bread machine, out of Gluten-Free Baking Classics for the Bread Machine cookbook.
Did you get
Clear?
all that? And then here's the spelt bread. It's done.
Okay. Oh, is this burning your hands to hold the handle? Okay. Here's the spelt loaf that we made, and we made it egg-free.
Can you see it?
So it does, the recipe calls for 1 egg. You can make it with or without the egg.
Good.
So for those of you who need to, it's already dairy-free. Okay?
Do you want both of these cut and served?
I do.
Okay.
Ah, okay. Okay, more herb butter, they're saying. Okay. As long as you don't feel that that would mask the taste too much. I do want you to know what you're trying. Okay. It will enhance the flavor. It will not mask the flavor. The jury has spoken. Look at that. Look at that spelt bread. Now I told him initially that we were not serving the spelt bread in class. So do y'all remember the whole spiel about the spelt? There's the handout to explain that further. You have that you can take home with you. If you're not comfortable with the spelt, then don't taste that when it comes by. So y'all just make sure it's labeled in case anyone in particular might feel insecure about that. Okay, now the multigrain loaves, you see where it comes to in the pan. I just divided it between 2 of these minis. It would half fill my 8-inch 1-pound loaf. Now I'm going to put it in my oven to proof at 100. Let's see, there's something proofing in that one, but this one should also be at 100, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Fantabulous. Okay, and we'll keep an eye on that. We actually expect that to double in size, and since it more than half filled the pan, we're not going to bake it as soon as it gets even with the top of the pan. We're going to let it rise higher, okay?
That was the timer for your brown and serve rolls. They've been rising for 30 minutes.
Okay. Wow.
Open to see what
I think we're good to go. The brown and serve rolls have risen in the proofer at 100 for 30 minutes. They've doubled in size. They didn't fill that cavity when we put them in. So we're going to go ahead and bake those for you.
400?
No, these bake at 275 for, let me remind myself how long. No, 275 for 20 to 25 minutes for our low and slow first step. Okay? Perfect.
So you always need to do the low and slow.
Yes, in this recipe, you do that low and slow. Even if you're going to serve them tonight with dinner, do the low and slow first.
Even if you're going to serve them right away.
Now, with wheat, you could actually let them rise and bake them at 400 for your 12 minutes and be fine. But, or for 10 minutes, but don't do that with these. They need that first step.
No matter when you're going to serve.
Right.
Even if you're going to serve them right away.
Yeah.
275 for how long?
275 for 30 to 35.
20 to 25.
20 to 25, excuse me. And we're watching for them to just begin to change color.
Okay.
And then we want to show them as they come out. Okay. So you may have noticed on Mimi's multigrain bread on page 7 that we just put in the proofer. Are you tracking with me? Mimi's multigrain bread, page 7, is what we just mixed up and divided between the 2 mini loaves. It is now in the proofing oven at 100 degrees. We're going to let it rise until double and then bake it. I want to point out on that page before I leave it 2 things. 3 things. 1, the savory bread variation that I've given you. We have some wonderful seasonings that come in a wide variety of flavors. Here's It's About Time. Here's Garlic of Eaton. Here's Roasted Red, the pepper spread. They all have those cute names indicative of what's inside. All of these are sold in a little, I want to say 4-ounce bag, and then a big 16-ounce bag. So once you figure out what your favorites are, you may want a bigger one. But we keep them here. We use them for so many things. But in that recipe, you can grind some of that in the TriBest Personal Blender, which I'm actually going to demonstrate. I'll show you the base so you know what I'm talking about. The TriBest Personal Blender. Here's a small cup with the 2-prong dry blade, which we'll use in a little bit. But you can, in the small cup with that same 2-prong dry blade, you can powder one of these seasonings. And I want you to know what's in these. Although each one is different in which vegetables and herbs are in them, they all are full of vegetables and herbs. They don't have any salt, they don't have any preservatives, they don't have any MSG, and something else. But they're dehydrated, so they're all very, very good for you. You know, those who don't eat their veggies, one of the most nutritious things they ever get in their diet is the herbs that they season their food with, or that their food was seasoned with for them. So just want you to know that those exist and that they're very good for you. I thought I heard a question. That actually just has fresh crushed garlic and butter warmed, and a little. The herb butter was Italian seasoning and a little bit of basil that we just happened to have on hand. Caleb had made it up for some other purpose, and I snagged it. So, and then I'm coming right back to you, but before I forget, I've given you a note on that recipe. The multigrain bread, you have a little leeway as to which of the gluten-free grains you use for the grain flour portion. And so you can make, you saw that that loaf is going to be nice and light. This is actually an already baked multigrain loaf, since we're still talking about that recipe, this one here. And it's nice and golden on the outside, but when you cut into it, it's very light in color. But you can, if you want a darker multigrain loaf, then you can just switch up the flours that you're using in that. The sorghum would be fine. The teff, you could do some a combination there. And I've already given you in the recipe that 1 cup of sorghum or teff or buckwheat. So today we used buckwheat in the one that's rising right now. In that one, I used sorghum. So if you want to taste some that's, I think it's 2 days old now, we'll slice it for you. Okay, we have that loaf that we can slice for you after class, so just let us know. And so you have some personal preference available to you there. And then the rice bread recipe, I just want to call your attention to the fact that in the red recipe collection that almost every customer we have already owns, you have a recipe on page 44, if I got that correct, for rice bread. This is an easy recipe that you can just stir up. It doesn't require any yeast, so you don't have that delay of waiting for it to rise. So if you need something fast and easy, that might be your go-to loaf of bread. And Sue has used that rice bread and served it like, yeah, kind of like strawberry shortcake was what I was trying to think of. So you can serve it just like that, you know, and make your fresh whipped cream and put your strawberries on top and all that. So she has done it that way. And then I've given you a note that that might also be a good place to substitute some of the coconut flour, as long as you remember you must increase your liquids when you do so. But I like that recipe because it does not require any yeast. On the other hand, I will tell you that typically the rice flour breads I don't care for, and I'll use the terminology that one of our gluten-free customers used with me. He came to our class, he and his wife. She came because she does the cooking in their family. He came because he was the one that was eating gluten-free, and he said he's just been so frustrated with everything they've made from a mix in the store, and it has all that white rice flour in it. He said it just feels like sand in my mouth. And so I think that Sue's recipe doesn't feel like sand in your mouth, and it's not made with white rice flour, it's made with brown rice flour and you're going to mill that brown rice in your mill to make that flour. But you don't have to stick with only rice flour in that recipe. So all of that rolled into one I wanted to highlight for you, and that's why I gave you that note in this handout so that you'll know it's in the recipe collection. You have access to it all the time. Experiment with it. You can use, it doesn't have to be rice flour. You can use some millet, or you can use one of the, whatever grain you like. We're going to go over, rice I would do on the bread. Just kind of 12 o'clock. The smaller grains we're going to grind on the pastry setting. Okay, we're going to come back to the oatmeal sandwich bread, which is it should be. Sharon, they want to make sure they know what they're eating. That's the Zoe loaf. It's your basic sandwich bread from the bread machine, what you're tasting right now. It's in the gluten-free baking classics for the bread machine. So those who are going to make their breads in the bread machine, that's the book that you need. And it's not just a couple of recipes. You're going to get a fistful of great bread machine recipes for your gluten-free loaves. Yes, hold off. My dairy-free, egg-free. Don't eat the one that we just took out. I made you one that has no egg and no dairy in it. That recipe calls for 1% or 2% milk, and I substituted rice milk. And it also calls for 2 eggs, and I used the flaxseed binder to replace the eggs. Okay? So she's got a loaf of that. Unfortunately, I couldn't do it this morning, so you're not going to get to taste it hot, but we can put the herb butter on it. Everything's... Oh, that's true, but everyone said they could have butter. They all told me that they could have butter. You're cheating. We're going to call the dairy-free police. Okay, so turn with me to page 5, please, of your handout. We're gonna come back to the oatmeal sandwich bread. Right now, I want you to focus on the bottom of the page, easy Teff bread. This one already has no eggs, no dairy. Okay? Y'all are talking. Okay, I'm just playing. You have been really good. Do you need to stand up and stretch? See, I'm getting to stand and stretch. I'm fine. Okay, I need another bowl. One more loaf in the mixer. Okay, your first test. This is easy Teff bread. And we're going to make this one in the mixer as well. Does this one have eggs and dairy? No, it does not. It's already egg-free, dairy-free, and of course it's gluten-free. So, let me grab my tray for the Teff, which should be right here. Now, before we start on this recipe, I actually need to mill the Teff into flour for you. And I saved it intentionally. I wanted to mill some things in front of you. So on this one, I need, let's see, how much Teff? I took my glasses off. Thank you. 1.5 cups of the Teff flour, and you have an option on the rest of your whole grain. You may choose sorghum, millet, or amaranth. Today we're going to try the millet in this recipe. So I've already done that one for you. And now the Teff, again, this is the only exception to the 2-pound bag, the 1-gallon pail, the 6-gallon bucket. I just have it in this size right now. And the Teff is the smallest grain in the world. You'll actually think, oftentimes folks think that they're looking at flour before they ever mill this. I'm going to just pass around a little cup that has some of the grain in it so you can see it up close and personal. And it's a dark, actually I'll ask the ladies too. Oh, thank you. If you'll just pass that around so you can see how very, very teeny tiny it is. It's a wonderful dark, rich color. It has a more robust color and flavor than some of the other grains. And I think that's a positive thing. And I think it's wonderful that you're going to have the option that all your breads aren't going to be so blonde. You can also have some dark, rich looking breads too. So, and you can see more exciting. Yeah, look at this. Yeah, brunettes versus blondes. My girls, I just love my girls. They're the best. Okay, so this is where I get to demo the mill for you. And I need, we said 1.5 cups of Teff flour. I'm going to get more flour than the amount of grain that I put in, but I don't know precisely exactly how much more flour. I found with the millet and the amaranth, I typically, if I need a cup of flour, I typically mill about 3/4 cup of the grain. In this case, I need 1.5 cups of flour. So if I don't know, I'm going to do a little more than a cup just to be sure that we have enough. But with this mill, I need to turn it on before I fill it. There's actually a reminder in the top of the mill that tells you that. And let me go ahead and get this poured. I'm going to set this for the teeny tiny grains like amaranth and millet and Teff. I'm going to set it on the pastry or the finest setting. So you might have a different mill and you're going to use your fine setting. Now, this is teeny tiny, and the other small ones that we've just named, you could stand after you turn the mill on and just slowly, slowly pour these grains in. Or you can pay a few dollars for the small grain adapter. And this will enable you, especially if I'm doing a lot of flour back to back, and the whole time I was prepping for class and testing recipes last week, I was using the small grain adapter. I just found it freed up my hands and was very convenient. On the adapter, it tells you at one end amaranth and teff. It tells you at the other end to do some other things. So you've got a label here. And the other end says quinoa, tapioca pearls, and salt. I want to hasten to say with the quinoa, that has a natural resin on it that needs to be rinsed off for most cooking. You're just gonna put that in a tightly woven sieve, run it under cool running water. You'll see the resin, the saponin, they make soap from it in some underdeveloped countries. But that saponin is going to bubble. Hi, Dr. Shay. It's going to bubble and foam a little bit. You're going to need to run it under that cool water for about 3 minutes solid to remove that natural resin. It's indigestible. None of us would intentionally choose to eat something that's going to make things have a slight taste. So I never mill the quinoa. Now we may begin to carry quinoa that is pre-rinsed and dried, and that can just go straight into the mill. But our quinoa is unprocessed and it's not rinsed and it still has that natural resin. So it's just one little extra step. The quinoa is wonderful in soups and stews and some other recipes that you'll see in Gluten-Free 201. A wonderful pilaf. Oh, we've got some great things we do with it, but I just never put it in the mill. You definitely can't put it in the mill if you have rinsed it. So, okay. Back to milling our teff. I want to make sure that I've got the mill set on pastry, which I do. And then I've got my small grain adapter with the teff setting on the bottom, or the teff end to the bottom. And now I'm going to turn the mill on. I want you to notice that I don't pour the grain down the center of the adapter. I'm pouring it around the outside. Okay? Turn the mill on. Oh! Get your lid on first. I declare, I'm not tall enough now that it's over there. There, it's on. No, it's not.
I'll just hold it for you. You just pour.
Okay. Yeah, that was a really important step. You see, it will mill without that lid on tight, but it will blow flour all over your kitchen. Awesome. Okay, and when you get to the place that you have a teeny bit, you can turn this to let it fall through, and then you can just remove it to let the final few grains fall in. Let it run for a couple of seconds. There it is. And then switch it off. Thank you, Ashley. Okay, so now you believe me when I say I'm here for comic relief. That was the whole plan.
I was going to say, this is what happens when you let a Georgia Tech engineer's wife run the mill.
Oh. Maybe that's the trouble. Yeah. Yeah, see, we don't agree on everything. Yes, yes. Somehow we remain friends. We do.
Because I'm married to a trader. That's why.
Okay, so when the cloud of dust settles and we can see one another again, this cover actually, I'll just mention to you while we're here, usually is on the top of your lid. You could, if you milled your flour and you have a little extra that you know you're going to use in just a little while, you could leave it in the canister and use that as your lid, or you can leave this on and use that as your lid. I keep the top of my mill covered at all times. I don't want my son's whatever he throws across the kitchen to land in there, and it's just a good dust cover, you know. So I keep that lid on all the time. So I'm going to have to turn the mill this way so I can get a grip on the canister lid. Okay. Now let me show you the flour. There was just an eensy bit of millet flour still in the bottom of the canister. You might see that little patch of yellow, but there's your Teff. It almost looks like chocolate. It's a nice deep brown. And then I'm just going to tap it to one side so that I can measure it easily. And this 0. I'm not cooking with anything that has any gluten. No gluten whatsoever. All of these grains have no gluten. Most of them are a complete protein just as they are. Wonderful, good for you. And then, as we mentioned before, those nutritional strengths I've highlighted for you. My Flip It measuring cup, I've got the 1 cup on one side and the half a cup on the other, and we do need 1.5 cups, correct? Okay, so I'm going to measure with it. I need to be careful to level that off. I'll get it into my mixing bowl. Yes. Perfect, out in the store. So the spelt bread will be in the store if you would like to sample that. Can we stop class? Well, some of them want you to pass it here and then I was thinking you had already passed it here and then you were taking the rest to the store. Nope. Okay, you have been called back. Okay. It's okay. Listen, we aim to please, so it actually helps me a lot when you tell me what you want. I am A-okay with that. That's what I want, my one. Well, while you're sampling the spelt bread, the wonderful thing about that, it's really, really nutritious. All the whole grains are. The spelt is highly water soluble, so it's quite bioavailable, if that's a term that you're familiar with. And that means that your body can access that nutrition readily. It's water soluble, but the other thing about that, it's actually it's a grain that is highly recommended for someone who has been very sick for a time, perhaps a cancer patient, or someone who has been malnourished, maybe a missionary serving in a foreign country where they don't have access to all the great, wonderful nutrition that they do in the States. But it's really recommended in that circumstance to help you, get reestablished and build your strength up again. So spelt is good. I like it. But again, the translation, if you're going to try baking with the spelt and using it, you can use it in conjunction with recipes that were actually, just wheat bread recipes. But who remembers how much spelt flour you'll use for every cup of wheat flour called for? Cup and a quarter, excellent. That's right. So 1 1/4 cups of spelt. You'll substitute in your wheat bread recipe for those of you who can do that. If you're going to cook with the spelt, you can substitute it in a recipe that was calling for wheat flour. I need cleanup on aisle 3. No. Well, what's different about the spelt is it's the one of those 3 ancient grains that does not contain that specific protein. Okay, they all have gluten. All of those ancient wheats have gluten, but the spelt doesn't have that specific kind of gluten that the celiacs cannot digest. 1 1/4 cup freshly milled spelt replaces 1 cup of freshly milled wheat flour with no other changes in that particular recipe. Okay, so I'm going to cover that. I'm just so easily sidetracked at the moment. Okay, do y'all remember what recipe we're about to do? It was the Teff bread. It's the Teff bread before. Easy Teff bread. Well, and it is. It is, but you know, the multigrain is easy too. They're very similar in the process of mixing them up, as you'll see. I need liquid 1.5 cups of warm water. Let me see if my water is, it's still slightly warm. I'm going to give it just a second in my Clower kettle. We'll give it just a few seconds to warm there. In my mixing bowl, can y'all see? In my mixing bowl, I've got the 1.5 cups of the Teff that we just milled, and I need 1.5 teaspoons of yeast. Again, that's half a tablespoon because a tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. So I'm going to measure that and then go ahead and slip my yeast back into the fridge. And right now my goal is just to get the dry ingredients into the mixing bowl so that I can incorporate those. What is that for? Is it the brown and
yes.
serve rolls?
I had to look and see what the original time was to know what it was.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, so actually,
What do you think, expert?
I think they need just another couple of minutes because
Okay.
they haven't changed color
Okay.
at all. We don't want them to brown, but we want them to just begin to turn color. Okay, so in the Easy Teff bread, you just start with the first 6 ingredients, get them into your mixer bowl. So my yeast that I just dumped in my flour, I was supposed to throw in here. It'll be fine though, because like I said, this yeast is okay just added with your flour. So that mistake is okay. Now I want to do my teaspoon of honey granules. You'll see the recipe calls for either the sucanat or the honey granules. The sucanat is the brown sugar replacement. You can use it the same way. And then I've got my 4 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. I love the little angled mini measuring cup for that. 4 tablespoons is also 1/4 cup. So, you know, in those recipes where you just need a small amount, it is just so handy. Now, I'm going to reuse that to measure my honey, and hopefully that oil is going to help it slide right out. So it's 3 tablespoons of honey, I believe. And when you measure it and let it sit, it takes longer to come out, but if you'll measure your honey always right after your olive oil, it should slide right out, and that did for us. Okay, so let's go ahead. This is boiling. That is hotter than warm, if you ask me. So I'm actually going to have to put a little cool water in it, or it's going to be too hot for our recipe. You see how fast that happened? Which is a wonderful, I mean, it's huge. It's huge. It's extremely convenient when you want hot water fast for tea or just to boil water. I've used it, I've used the kettle when I need my water to boil quickly for pasta. So it's actually, you know, this is pretty doggone hot. I still feel I'm actually gonna. What I don't want to have happen here is for it to be so hot that it kills my yeast. So you can actually take, I really got it hot. Okay. You can actually use the instant read thermometer. I'm going to check the temperature of this water so that I make sure I don't kill the yeast and ruin our recipe. We actually have several digital instant read thermometers to offer. And particularly if you're going to be making your loaves in the bread machine, you will need this type of thermometer. Okay, now that I have poured out a lot of the hot and added some cold, we are at 95 degrees and that is going to be fine. So somewhere in that range of 90 to 110 is great. So we're at a place where I'm comfortable now adding it. Okay. And let me see where I am. We have in our water, our honey granules, our olive oil, our honey, and now I want to grind for you 2 tablespoons of the flaxseed. Now, the way your recipe is written tells you whether to measure the flaxseed before or after you have ground it. In this recipe, we want 2 tablespoons after it's freshly ground. So you're going to get more than what you put in, so you don't need 2 full tablespoons in the blender cup. You'll see the texture change and it'll get smooth and start to clump together a little bit when it's nice and fine. And as we said earlier, the flaxseed is helpful in binding your bread together. And it's taking, the warm water and the flaxseed are taking the place of egg in this recipe. Not that it called for egg initially, but it would need egg if it didn't have something to do that job. Okay, now actually I'm going to remeasure this to make sure that I'm not way over my guesstimation, and put my 2 tablespoons in. And in gluten-free baking, again, measure precisely, take a moment to level things off. Maybe the brown and serve are ready. Ashley's going to check those, and if they're done, we'll show them to you. This was the first phase. This is the low, slow bake that happens initially on the brown and serve. Okay, where am I? Got the flaxseed in, and so, okay. Our oven temperature may be the question mark that's going on here. We will both tell you that that can be very frustrating. Okay, so turning this on, have it on fairly low. Mill's in the way. Okay, and so in my separate bowl, I need to get my dry ingredients together. I've got those pre-measured. Lecithin. This should be my xanthan gum. Salt. This is the millet flour. You have an option there. And today we're using the millet, but you could use the amaranth, you could use the sorghum. You could also use oat for that matter. That'd be fine. And now a couple of starches. We've got the arrowroot and the tapioca. And I just want to combine those. And very similar process. I'm going to start out gradually mixing in some of the flour on the lower speed. Then we're going to get the rest in and increase our speed. All about getting a nice texture to your bread. So while technically we're not kneading, our mixing method is going to help to make it a lighter, fluffier loaf. Okay, there we go. I'll go ahead and get the other half in. And let's see how it's behaved. Now this is a single recipe. You could definitely double or even triple this recipe. Most of us don't need that much fresh bread on hand all the time, but you could freeze a loaf or share a loaf. Okay, I'm going to go into the middle with my roller and snag that little bit of flour. I'm going to increase the speed. Oh, you know what what I also want to do is go ahead and get the roller off the side of the bowl, but I don't want to do that at top speed. So we're going to do that at a lower speed. And you just tighten it up. And what that does, now the roller's not going to be up against the side of the bowl. It's going to allow some of that dough to run between it and the bowl and do a good job of mixing and fluffing for us. But this arm is still free to move back and forth. And if I had more dough or batter in there, or the example I used before, garlic mashed potatoes, which are wonderful in here, then it would be free to work and mix and knead. Does that make sense? Okay, so a little bit higher speed for just a minute. And I'll clear this. And then this is going to go in a 1 pound loaf pan. And it should about half fill this pan, and then we're going to let it rise until doubled. And again, you have the option to use other sizes, smaller sizes. You can't go bigger than this, but you could go smaller. All right. Up. All right. Any questions about the Teff bread before we move on? One of the ovens needs to be at 350 for this loaf. Of course, it's going to proof first. And we need to check on our multigrain bread, which is proofing. And then I'll take a question. Oh yeah, this is ready to go in. The multigrain, I'm going to have to peek back at my recipe. It bakes at 400 for 35 minutes. So, and I actually, yesterday I checked it in 30, and it didn't quite take the 35, so, but you know, temperature's not.
Well, if it's ready to bake, this is at 400 now.
Okay.
And if your Teff bread has to proof before
Yeah,
it bakes,
yeah.
well then we should be able to bake that while that's proofing.
Awesome.
And then turn it down. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we have one oven ready. We'll go ahead and get the multigrain bread in. I do want them to.
Take it off and I'll let them see it.
Yeah. I want you to see it risen.
There's the brown and serve rolls after they've done their, what did you say, low slow?
Yeah. Yeah. So she's just going to cool those. And then since y'all are here and you seem to be enjoying them, we'll go ahead and bake them for you. But, oh yes. More butter? What are y'all, Paula Deen? I mean, I love Paula Deen, but you know, she's famous for the butter. I do love Paula Deen. I did not. Yeah. All right, let's get a spatula. And you know, the batter is always going to be moist. Yeah, they've risen. You see how that's above the top of the pan? So it's approximately doubled in size, and now we're ready to bake. This is the multigrain loaf, and we use some of the lighter colored grains, so it's going to be kind of a lightly colored loaf. Meanwhile, back to easy Teff bread. 400 for 35, so we'll check it in 30. Okay, so scraping with a spatula, and all of this goes into the 1 pound loaf. But as I said before, you certainly could double this if you prefer, and you certainly could bake it in a smaller loaf pan. And it's enough batter to a little bit more than half fill the pan. So there again, when it doubles in size, it's going to be up above the top of this pan. That's what I'm looking for. And similar to the way that we shaped the multigrain loaf, you will also need to press this to the corners and level it off.
For your brownie circles, do you want them to completely cool before I bake them again?
If they don't, then we'll have to bake them for a shorter amount. I just don't know how they'll turn out. So yeah, we probably, maybe.
Let them cool in the pan, or should I dump them out?
They'll cool faster out of the pan probably, I'm guessing. Okay, so this is going to proof at 100. It will probably take a good half hour, maybe even 45. Since that loaf is going to be baking, we've got a timer set that's going to go off in 28, 29 minutes. So that'll be a good opportunity for us to check the status of the Teff proofing.
You're using proofing interchangeably like rising.
Yeah. Don't mean to confuse you with that. I appreciate you bringing out that point. I'm talking about it proofing. I mean rising. Same thing. I'm using that word to explain rising. So at this point, I'm through with the mixer, and we're going to prepare a loaf for the bread machine, which is basically about me showing you how to load that bread machine pan. So I'm going to grab my ingredients for the oatmeal sandwich loaf. And you don't have the full recipe in your handout, but you do have a clue to a wonderful bread flour recipe. This is it's in the Gluten-Free Classics for the Bread Machine book, but the flour recipe is giving you the proportions of grains and starches to use as a bread flour. So if you happen on some recipes that you want to try and it just says gluten-free bread flour, then this is a nice mix that you can make up and have on hand. So even if you're not going to make your breads in the bread machine, then that'll just be a handy recipe for you to have. So I wanted you to have those proportions. It's going to be about 50%, or it is 50% fresh milled whole grains and 50% starches. And on the whole grains, you do have some options there. So I recommend, it's basic, when in terms of these fractions, you could do, you could also think of it in 2 parts, 1 part, if that helps you. So you'll be doing 2 parts millet flour and then 1 part of everything else on the list. But you need to decide, in addition to the millet, which other whole grain would you like to use. And that could be amaranth or teff or sorghum. All of those work really nicely. I've gotten some great 4.5-inch loaves using the sorghum. And since I mentioned the sorghum, I have a surprise for you. And by the way, that's not a dead tree, that's a dried bay leaf branch. So those are bay leaves that we can actually use in our cooking for soups and stews. Okay, so, but this is sorghum. This is the stalk of the sorghum. This is how it looks growing. So I'm just going to lay that out front, and you can come by and look at it. It's a little bit fragile. I don't want us to really pass it around and handle it, but I want you to come up and see it if you'd like. Sorghum molasses is a different plant. It's not the same. Okay. So, that said, if you will, we're still on page 5, but you don't have the whole recipe in front of you, okay? Everybody understands what you have is the flour proportions if you want to make your own bread flour for just any erroneous recipe out there. And it'll work in just about anything and everything. But I do want to underscore just once more and encourage you, if you're making waffles or pancakes or muffins for breakfast or some other quick bread such as banana bread or pumpkin loaf or something like that, that's a perfect place to use 100% of the whole grains. You don't have to use 50% starches. Okay, so that's a great place to get that in. So let's turn our attention to the oatmeal sandwich bread. Very, very similar to the basic sandwich bread that you just tried. The primary difference is just that it calls for 2 2/3 cup of the bread flour mix and 1/3 cup of coarsely ground oatmeal. For your coarsely ground oatmeal, what I do is take the Tribest Personal Blender, the small cup with the 2-prong dry blade, and you could put the gluten-free rolled oats in here, or you could put the steel cut oats, just depending on what you have on hand and what's convenient for the moment. Either one of those is going to make a nice coarse flour for this recipe. And so I've actually already blended this some, and I should have waited and done it in front of you, but I just got ahead of myself. So we'll just give it a quick pulse. And then we're going to need to measure this. Meanwhile, for the sake of time and the complexity of all that I was doing, I went ahead and made up my bread flour mix. So I milled those individual grains using the process that I demonstrated in the mill, and then combined them here. It's a good idea to actually put this in, mix it in something other than just an open mixing bowl, something that you can put a lid on, even if it's just a big jar, because I want you to shake it, to aerate it before you do any measuring. Same with the starches. And so I shook the starches and measured them, leveling them off carefully before I put them in here. This actually has the 50% starches, and this is a combination of amaranth, buckwheat, and millet. Or actually it wasn't originally, but you just can't put any, you just cannot put the wet. It should be rinsed. The quinoa should be rinsed before it goes in before it is cooked with. But you can't put something wet in the mill. So if it hasn't been rinsed, you haven't hurt your mill. You haven't really hurt yourself. But it is an indigestible resin, and it does tend to lend a bitter taste to things. And particularly, folks, with your gluten-free bread and rolls, it's very transparent in its flavor. So you would notice something like that in your gluten-free baking, I would think.
Try to wash it and soak for 2 or 3 minutes and then take it out and let it dry?
No, I haven't washed it and dried it on my own for the purpose of going back into the mill. I could. I mean, I have a dehydrator. I could make sure, but that's just a process I choose not to deal with. And you know, I just don't. So let's do this. In this recipe, you're going to need a cup of milk, not whole milk, because it has too much fat and it will cause your loaf to be heavy and short. So they recommend skim milk, 1% or 2%. And I will use, I've used everything from almond milk and rice milk to 2%. So this is this loaf is not going to be ready in time for y'all to have it today, but I am going to use what they call for, which is the 2% milk. And it's 1 cup. Now, the catch is you can't take your milk right out of the refrigerator and measure it into this recipe. It needs to be between 65 and 75 degrees. And I have learned that it only takes me why don't I just move some of this out of your line of vision? There we go. So, but I've learned that it just takes a few seconds to warm it up. Because if you think about it, 65 to 75 degrees, that's still cool. That's not even body temperature. But it is an important step. So I'm going to use my instant read thermometer to check that temperature. And then I'm going to be using the whisk that you see there to whip in the oil and the egg. They want that to be frothy. And so if you need to use one of the egg replacers, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it off. I had it on its lowest temperature setting for just a few seconds, as you saw. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off and check it with the instant read thermometer. Yeah, it was just bugging me. Okay, so here's my thermometer. Let's see where it is. 67, 68. So I'm right in the proper zone. I'm content, and we're moving on. So at this point, I can now add my 2 eggs and my oil to this. And then I started to say, if you're using an egg replacer in this recipe, you're still going to whip the egg replacer with the oil and the milk. It just won't get quite as frothy. But you know, you're looking to whip it and combine it. I think it's 4 tablespoons, 3, yeah, 1/4 of a cup. But this is, I know that I've said this in so many words a couple of times, but I can't overemphasize that you measure precisely, you get things to the temperature that are called for, you set up your homemade settings to exactly her homemade settings, because she's already done the repeated tests and figured out the ins and outs for you. So take full advantage of that and do exactly as she says. So the 2 eggs go in, and we're just going to whip this until frothy, and it goes directly into my pan. And the step I just did was to make sure my paddles were down. One of them wasn't fully seated. That was going to cause some problems. All right, we're getting some bubbles. The eggs aren't frothy yet. Reminds me of an episode of MASH where Alan Alda was going to get to do he was going to get to have KP duty, and he wanted to make his mom's French toast or something, you know, and so he's telling him, you got to whip the eggs till they're frothy, and then the guy that works in the kitchen dumps that powdered egg stuff into the water and starts mixing it in that giant mixer, and it was very disappointing to our co-star. Okay, I'm thinking that's looking frothy. What do you say? Okay, so this goes into the bottom. And then we're going to combine our dry ingredients in a separate mixing bowl. You see a pattern here, don't you? We do a lot of that. Okay, so my bread flour here. And in this case, because we're doing the oatmeal sandwich loaf this time, I'm going to need 2 2/3 cup of the bread flour. It may actually, let's see. So I'm going to level it off with that. No, those have to be browned again. They're probably, they may be cool enough now to put back in the pans. Do you still have the little mini muffin pans? Okay. Yeah, we'll get them ready to bake and serve. I think they want them. They say as long as you give them more butter, they'll be happy. Y'all are so funny. Okay, so I've never had this outcry for butter before. But I love it that you're talking back to me in a nice way. Okay, and I actually need 2/3. This one is 2/3 on one side, 1/3 on the other. I love that I get the 2/3 in one swoop. All right, so let me fill that. And so you never, with your gluten-free flours and your starches, you never want to pack those down. You want to be aerating and gently spooning them in and leveling them off. Because when you over measure your flour, then you're asking for a heavy, short loaf, and that's not what we want. Okay, so there's our bread flour, and now we need 1/3 cup of our coarsely ground oat flour. So I'm going to flip my measuring cup. Do y'all see that? You're going to get a good look when they come out of the oven, but they're rising even more. So I had a multigrain loaf recipe prior to this one that it was so inconsistent in turning out, and I got so frustrated with it that I chucked it. And so I've been very pleased as I've experimented with this one. I haven't had it flop yet. Okay, so now I need my handy dandy extra flour bowl because I'm going to have a smidget of the oat flour remain. It's 400, 8 to 10.
Okay.
Yeah, they're getting to do the musical ovens behind me. I'm so appreciative of that. There's no way I could do this and that at the same time. Okay, so let me go back to, I still have a couple of dry ingredients to add to this, and that is a little bit of the honey granules. And yes, you could use half as much of your raw honeys, and that would work fine. Then this is the xanthan gum. That's going to give it the ability to hold together for you, and then a little bit of salt. And the yeast I'm going to measure last. I'm not going to mix it in with my dry ingredients. But just, you want to combine this well. And now it's just going to go right into the pan over the wet ingredients. And guess what, girls? They're going to get to have some more butter in the apple dessert. So if you want to grab about a stick and a half, or I forget how much it calls for, but we're doing more than a single recipe, I think. So you'll need to melt it because we're going to toss the bread cubes. And Ashley, if I could ask you to dice up some of the pre-made loaves beside you, and then be careful to reserve some of that egg-free, dairy-free. We're going to do a miniature in the pie pan so that those folks can have some apple dessert as well. Yeah, you can use anything you got over there for the other, but just be sure and use the. And we're going to do about 6 nice size slices is the original recipe. We're probably going to end up, you'll probably need almost the whole loaf to fill the. Let's start with 8 slices and see if that looks like about that apple dessert. When we get to it, you're going to see it. You don't have to measure precisely. You can kind of do how much leftover stale bread you have on hand, and then use the appropriate amount of butter to toss them in, and the appropriate amount of apples to suit your taste. So, really easy. You can't mess that up. Okay, what's wrong with this picture? I can't leave it like that. I have to level this off. And then we need some yeast. In the book, it calls for a packet of active dry yeast. Now, so instead, you're going to use you would think 2 teaspoons, but I'm actually getting, when I use 2 teaspoons, this is so, it just works, this yeast works really well. And so I find if I use the full 2 teaspoons that we normally substitute in other recipes, it overrises a little bit and then it wants to fall some. So I have learned to back off to 1.5 teaspoons. So I'm going to do 1.5 teaspoons, which is the same thing as 1/2 tablespoon. And just evenly distribute that right over the top. But if you'll take off the hard crust, thank you. No, 2 teaspoons of our Firmapan instant yeast will replace the 1 packet of active dry yeast in a recipe. You just don't need to do that extra step of dissolving it in the warm water. Okay, so that's all there is to loading that pan. And then it's just going to sit straight down into the zoharushi. I have 3 homemade cycles on this machine, and so I've set up one of those with the gluten-free settings, which are given to you in the book, so there's no guesswork at all. And this is just going to press right straight down into that, and we'll press start to begin that cycle. It takes 2.5 hours exactly for that loaf to be ready. Okay, any questions about the bread machine or that process that we just did? Okay, great. Am I using the preheat? It does have a brief preheat. It does. The cycles don't resemble wheat bread at all. So for that reason, I cannot, and therefore I suspect you cannot either, get a successful loaf in the little mini-zo. The mini-zo doesn't have the homemade blanks for you to set up with your own settings, and so I haven't been able to get a nice loaf there, and I think that's the reason. I think it was intended to do the wheat breads, and all those factory pre-settings cater to that. But the good news is you have your choice of the white model, the black model, or the new Virtuoso, which actually has 2 heating elements, one in the top and the bottom, so it browns nice and evenly on the top as well as the bottom and the sides. Okay, let's get ready to make apple dessert, and I'm feeling like I may have forgotten to do a recipe, but hopefully not. Now I have so much flour in my rag. but I got floury wiping off. Okay, so again, what we're going to start now is apple dessert. They're cubing that bread for me, but what I want to demo for you is our handy tool for slicing your apples. And this is the apple slicer corer. I believe it's made by Norpro. It always takes me more than one try to. Yes. Okay. The wonderful thing about this is if you needed your apples peeled for a specific recipe, it will peel them while it slices and cores them. I always choose to keep the skin on any fruit or vegetable that I can for the nutrition and the fiber. So we're keeping the skin on. I pre-washed these apples yesterday using the veggie wash. And these are nice organic Fuji apples, which has a nice sweet and tart flavor. It's just one of the ones I like. And then I need a cutting board. I think that's one right there. There we go. Nice flexible cutting board. And we'll use that to slice them into little bite-sized pieces. With my favorite, do any of you have those ceramic knives? Oh my goodness, do you love them as much as I do? Before this came into our home a couple of years ago, I was just really honestly frustrated because there was not a sharp knife in the house. Even if it was always a constant battle to keep them sharpened. And even when they were sharpened, they were nowhere near as sharp and easy to use as this. So it's just my favorite. I'm just going to have to brag on my baby. Let me show you how to do this. This little arm is the blade for peeling. And then you have a lever here to engage that. I'm leaving the lever where it's locked out because, as we said before, I'm actually not peeling mine. Oh, I thought you were trying to get my attention. So there's also a little lever here. You see the little finger push. That allows you to pull the lever back and get your apple in place. So I'm just going to press it onto the prongs. My son enjoys doing this job for me, and he kind of races himself to see how quickly he can do a bunch of them. Whee! Okay, now it's like accordion style. And then I'm just going to cut those to bite size. And I'm going to do a couple more for you, and then I'll let Ashley do probably 3 or 4 more apples. We want a few. Yes, a bowl would be great. All right, so then you have to wrestle the core off, which just takes a firm tug and a good grip. And then here we go again. Press it, you're just lining up the stem with those 3 little prongs. Is anybody dying to try it? We need more apples. You could try one. Don't you wish you had an instant assistant at your side in your kitchen at home? Yeah, she's great. All right, so we're up to 3. And you can see in just a matter of 30 seconds or a minute, you can have all the apples you need for this recipe and then some. I like this for preparation for apple slices going into the dehydrator. And you can season your apples before you dehydrate them if you like, with maybe just a little cinnamon, or you could make your own caramel sauce, and then while it's still warm and thin, brush one side only of your apple with that. Lay them on your dehydrator trays, and oh my goodness, the children will fight over that. Not just children though, but since I have 4 of those, I know about that scene. Yeah, no, you can't core it without slicing it. You can core it without peeling it, and you can core it, slice it, and peel it all at one time. But yeah, it's gonna slice it. Yeah, I see where you're going with that. Put some stuff in the middle and bake it. I mean, you could do that, but yes, yes. Okay, here's our multigrain loaf, hot from the oven. She's going to turn that out and let it cool over there on a rack. Yeah. We got our pink going on today. And I actually brought a blouse this color to wear, and then just didn't get around to changing clothes. Don't know why I'm telling you that. Just, I think because it has become a joke around here, we get to work and look at one another and we're like, okay, we're all in blue today. Okay, we're all in green today. Okay, we're all in purple today. You know, honestly, it happens so much. Okay, that's great. I think that'll be our last one, yeah.
Okay.
Now, with this, you know, the recipe says, what does it say there? 3 to 5... 3 or 4 large apples? Okay. Did my change not take? I thought I typed more in there. 3, okay. Yeah, so these are kind of small apples. You know, I've seen larger apples, so. But you really can't get this wrong. This recipe's included so that I could show you a creative way to use your stale bread, because occasionally you're not going to finish a loaf, and you know that you can always do this with it. But you can put as few or as many apples as you like, but I don't think you'll be as in love with the recipe if you don't put very many apples in it. Okay. And then we sell our cinnamon in a great little box. This probably, I'm going to do one more. And then remember, if you'll divide these apples between the 2 dishes. We're going to do a 9 by 13 for the crowd, and then a small one. Do you want to see us combine this? May as well, right? You have nothing else to do. Okay, and so the bread cubes need to be buttered, and so I just need like the biggest mixing bowl that we have. I've pretty much used them all, so yeah, could I have, oh, well actually, Sharon, thank you. She's got the bread cubes in the bowls. We're good.
This is your egg-free, dairy-free, but
okay.
How are you going to do that with the butter?
Well, they tell me they can still have butter, but but here's the thing. My egg-free, dairy-free, I was planning to do yours since I have the egg-free, dairy-free bread for you. Who is that? Who am I talking to? Egg-free, dairy-free? Thank you, thank you. Okay, so I have the egg-free, dairy-free bread for you, and I was planning to use the coconut oil instead of the butter. So are you okay with that? Okay, let's do it.
We'll do that then.
So that's going to be way too much butter for those, but we're going to, if you will melt. What did you say? It won't be too much. Oh, okay. Yeah, so we're just going to guess at this because I think we're going to do about 1/4 of a cup.
That's very, very
Fantastic. This is clean if you wanted to use that. I'll let her melt that for just a few seconds in the microwave, and then we're going to use the coconut oil in that one.
That looks about right, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah. That may actually, you know, for this much, it may be, I think it's too much. We don't want it, yeah, we don't want it greasy. Greasy. Okay, so the idea is to toss your bread crumbs in the butter and the honey granules or sucanat and cinnamon. I personally really like the rich flavor of the brown sugar sucanat. You know, it's kind of warm, rich, and to me it complements the cinnamon really well, but it is going to darken the color of your dish here. So I'll use the, let's take a vote. You're willing to tell me what you really want, so let's go with it. If you want the light honey granules in the apple dessert, tell me. You're okay with the sucanat? Let's go! All right. Let's do it. It will just look a little darker, but man, it tastes good. So, you know, think of the sucanat is going to substitute 1 for 1 anywhere brown sugar is called for in a recipe, and it makes a great streusel topping. Yes, I do need cinnamon. Thank you. No, there is no dreaded nutmeg in this. Ashley really dislikes nutmeg. However, her mom loves nutmeg. So there's a battle going on in their home.
Denise just won major points.
Even though I'm a you-know-what fan. Okay, so you don't really have to measure carefully on this. Sprinkle how much cinnamon you like. You know, I like, some people really get upset when I can't give them a recipe because I just sort of dumped. But that's the kind of cook my mom is, and that's how I learned to make cornbread as a child. Or not as a child, as soon as I got married. I came over, no, yeah, I was fairly young. But that was how I learned to make it. She just let me come and watch her make it a couple of times. And then I went home and tried it. But it, you know, there was no measurement to it. It was how much when it looked right. Okay, so what I want to do is just kind of toss the cinnamon before I dump the butter on. Otherwise, all the cinnamon's going to stick to just those few. I think that you could mix the cinnamon in with the butter. Be no problem. So I'm just going to drizzle some over. One thing that the butter does for you, in addition to that wonderful salty flavor, it's going to help the bread that's on top to brown and get a little crust on it. Okay, so we're just going to toss that well. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we have all these great apples, and our bowl is too full for me to do the trick I want to do and add some stuff to that. So this is where the brown sugar and more cinnamon. Did I already? Oh,
I pulled away. I'm sorry.
Okay, more cinnamon. I like cinnamon. I do a lot of cinnamon. So, y'all okay with that? Okay then, here we go. I'm going to try the sprinkle again, although I didn't do very well with it the first time. Okay, that's a pretty good dousing, wouldn't you say? I call that aromatherapy. Okay, and I need we're not measuring, we're just using it as a scoop. But you could measure. I mean, I told you a cup for that much, but we're not doing that much exactly. Okay. So in that goes. And I don't want it to be too terribly, terribly sweet. Although it is dessert, The apples themselves are sweet. And the apples go in the bottom of the dish, and the bread goes on top. It is a good idea to brush the dish with either, you could spray it with a little cooking spray, or you could brush it with your coconut oil or your butter. I think we have herb butter on the, oh no, there's my brush. Do you have any coconut oil in your dish?
A little bit left.
Yeah. So we'll just brush that. And then it'll come right out. Awesome. Let y'all have a little bit of the coconut oil. Coconut oil, this is the extra virgin coconut oil. It is so good and so good for you. And you can actually use it to replace butter or the vegetable shortening that's sometimes called for in recipes. You can use it in an equal amount in those recipes.
Because did y'all see how it was a solid?
Uh-huh.
It's cold enough, it turns into a solid.
There you go.
Take this here.
You can actually, you can get out of the shower and rub a little on your skin. Did you know that what you put on your skin absorbs into your bloodstream faster than what you eat? Faster than the pill you swallow? It does. And so the coconut, that's one way to get that wonderful nutrition and get soft, silky, smooth skin at the same time. Y'all didn't know you were coming for a beauty lesson. The guys are thinking, I did not come for that. Just give me the apple dessert, would you? No, we need to serve it. They want it. They want it while it's warm. Okay. All right. So this is all there is to it. So I'm just going to put the bread, the buttered bread on top. And I mean, how simple is that? And you know, you can multiply it. You can make more. You can make just a little bit if you only have half of a small loaf left, or you have a small family. Yeah, you definitely, I mean, that was where I got the recipe. It was originally made with regular wheat bread. All right. Now, how are we doing on time? Okay. Yeah, we goofed. This actually was intended to be a 4-hour class, and we advertised it as 3. So I know it looks like I'm running really late, but I'm pressing to be done before 4 hours is up. So, and this is what we're going to do for you now is serve. The brown and serve rolls came out. You're serving multigrain right now. Brown and serve next. Teff bread when it gets ready. I think it was, oh dear, I bet it is proofed. Remember, we were going to check it when the brown and serve rolls came out?
Well, they just came out and look comparable.
Yeah, it's at the right place. We're okay.
All right, so this needs to go
Luckily.
350.
Is it? Let me just double check. My grandson says, shh. Oh, thank you. 350 for 35 to 40. Yeah, my grandson says, check it and see, Mimi. Check it and see. All right. Now, do we have an oven that's not occupied for our apple? It needs 350 until like 30 minutes. And it's fine to do these together. Okay, so this actually completes the instructional portion of your class. And so at this point, I can field any questions that you might still have. And we're just going to get some more food cooked and ready to serve. So what I'd like to do is answer your questions, and then I'm going to release you to stretch your legs, visit the restrooms if you need them, browse the store. You can come and talk to any of us to ask your questions. And Sharon has graciously agreed to be on hand to sign your book. So if you're getting Mommy and Me Gluten-Free today, she'll be happy to sign that for you. Okay, any questions? Yes? The spelt and what? Okay, yes, yes. Yeah. Well, yeah, so you're exactly one of the people that you're kind of in that gray area. First of all, you can go back to your healthcare practitioner and ask, what test was it that you ran on me, and did it just show that I'm gluten sensitive, or am I celiac? Typically, okay, well, if you're not celiac, then you probably can have it, but you want to try a small amount at a time and just see how you do. You know, when I have something that I'm not able to tolerate, and these symptoms are going to vary, but when I have something I can't tolerate, within 15-20 minutes, I feel drowsy and tired. I might begin to feel bloated and just kind of lethargic. With certain things, when I get corn by accident, which is my primary offender, really the only thing that I still cannot have at all, for the next day, I can almost not get out of bed. It is just all I can do. It lays me flat. But it also really messes with my ability to think clearly. I'm just foggy brained and, slow thinking as well. So, other people might break out in hives. A more severe allergy, something like tongue swelling, or just tongue itching. I know my mother-in-law, if she has pineapple, her tongue just itches to beat the band. My daughter, on the other hand, ended up in the hospital at college when she got some unaware, so just allergy symptoms and food sensitivity reactions run the gamut. So, but you can, one way to know is, how do I feel in 15 or 20 minutes? When you're eating foods that agree with you and that are building your system up, and you're not overeating and binging at your meals, you should feel energized and alert and ready to go and take a walk, ready to sit at your desk and do your job. So if you feel bad and you can't think clearly, or you have some other noticeable symptom after something that you're eating, you've developed a sensitivity to that. So I know that's a broad answer, and I'm not qualified to give you any medical advice, and that's not my goal, but just from my experience and lots of people I know. I will say, speaking to the spelt issue and just to overcoming those food sensitivities, because I told you I used to have a list of 7 or 8. Now I'm just down to the one that I've had all my life. And I know of a couple of examples, and Sharon can share with you that she wrote a gluten-free cookbook and then discovered spelt, and her son, who was, her testimony, you need to hear his testimony and her explain. I'm sure she'll be happy to share some details with you about that. But her son was having severe reactions to a list of things, and he actually does very well with the spelt. So, there's an example. And then I know of another young man in his high school years. He happens to be severe asthmatic, and wheat was one of his greatest allergies. So wheat, soy, and dairy, I think, were his top 3, and he actually abstained from wheat for a full year. And then at the end of that time, his mom began to make his bread using freshly milled hard red wheat. And he did fine on that. Now he had to give his system a rest from the offender, you know, and work on bolstering his health in that time frame. But, you know, I just think I want to encourage you, some of you that just have a food sensitivity right now, it really bothers you and you can't eat that thing. If it's a true allergy, such as, you know, certain fruits, and, you know, if you have a true allergy to something, then that reaction may not ever go away. But if you've developed a sensitivity, oftentimes it's because you're getting way too much of something. One way to know what that something is, if you're still trying to figure out what it is what do you crave all the time? Because you'll actually crave that thing. And so that's one way to, you know, kind of pinpoint it. But you can also just, for a season, eat foods that are unfamiliar to you. That's a good way to figure it out. Okay. No. A true celiac, the only issue there with the spelt is that it not be run through a flour mill where you've been milling other wheat, and that the way the spelt itself is handled. Yeah, because the issue is that because it's not a gluten-free grain, it does go through the same hopper with our wheat and barley, and that, not together, never at the same time, and it is thoroughly blown out just with air in between. So, you know, so we feel that we're removing all the visible dust, but, you know, so that's where the question mark lies. So that's just going to be a personal choice. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Great. Uh-huh. Okay. So she's saying her husband, who's a diabetic, handles the spelt very well and doesn't get the sudden sugar spikes with that. Okay. Anything else? Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Right. Okay, she's thinking of using spelt and teff in the same recipe. The question mark for me there is just which recipe are you going to go with, you know? Well, just realize the teff has no gluten. So it has no stretch and give. So my recommendation would be try that combination in a recipe that was written for gluten-free and just omit the starches. Use all your flour because you're going to get that light softness from your spelt. Does that make sense? Right, right. Unfortunately, I mean, your handicap is you're in uncharted waters. You're going to be doing these trials for the first time. But based on everything that I've made so far and how it responds, I've never tried to combine the spelt in with the gluten-free baking. But it just depends on how much teff you were going to use. I mean, if it was, let's just say if it was 1/8 of the total of your cooking, then yeah, you could go in and use your wheat bread recipe and just use the spelt. But if you want to use a good bit of the teff, then I would use the spelt and the teff in a recipe that was written for gluten-free and just omit the starches. You know, I probably wouldn't go halvesies on that. Maybe 1/3 spelt, 2/3, I mean, excuse me, 1/3 teff, 2/3 spelt. But you know, you do your experimenting and please let me know. Okay?
One question. In the brown sugar roll, it does call for 1 egg. Do you use any of these eggs?
Yes. Yes. She's asking if she can use the egg substitutes in the brown and serve rolls. Absolutely. That's why I'm giving you that. You know, those of you who need that, take the egg substitute handout, and you can actually choose from the 4. You know, use whatever you like. I pretty much stick with the flaxseed binder myself. I like that extra boost of the fiber, and I like how it resembles an egg. You know what, girls? So that they can have it, even though it's not fresh and hot, why don't we go ahead and slice the day-old Teff bread? It's actually, when did I make this? It's actually I made it on Monday, I think. So, but if you want to try that and not stick around for the one that's baking, if you're still here, you can definitely have the one that's baking now when it's fresh and hot, okay? Yeah. We'll let you try that. Okay, so, I also like how the flaxseed binder, you can mix a jar of that up, like you can triple and quadruple that and mix it up and then keep it in a small jar in the refrigerator and then scoop out 1/4 cup for an egg in a recipe. So it's handy. I just really love the flaxseed binder when I use that one typically, if I'm going to. Say that again. You would be more concerned about that if it weren't whipped into that water and then it congeals. So, but even if it does, it's my egg replacer. I'm going to have to use it. But I'm getting all those omega-3 fatty acids and all that wonderful boost of fiber. So there again, if blood sugar spikes is a real issue with you, then you want to start experimenting with that coconut flour. I mean, 10 grams of fiber in 1/4 cup. Okay, so that's your place, and it's high protein as well. We have the coconut flour here. There might be. It's just the dried coconut meat, and then it's once it's dried, it's powdered. Yeah, it's already in flour form. This is it right here. Mm-hmm. No, don't put the. Yeah, that's actually a bread knife. That's actually a bread knife. Yeah, I'm going to let you look at this package. You're going to use it substitute it for 1/4 cup of your other flour, whatever that is. You know, you can do it in place of, if you're going to do your spelt Teff bread, then, use it for 1/4 cup of your spelt, but then you have to increase your liquids by at least 1/4 cup or maybe slightly more. Go, go, go. And then, now this is the Teff bread that was made back on Monday. It's not going to be as wonderful as the Teff bread that's going to come out of the oven hot in just a little bit. But one of the tips for using the coconut flour is that you can replace up to 20% of the flour in one of your recipes with the coconut flour. But whatever that 20% comes out to in flour measurement, let's say it's 1/2 cup, then you have to increase your liquids by that 1/2 cup as well. Okay? I'll let you look at the bag and see what you think about that. It's organic. Okay. Thank you. So glad y'all were with us today. Ashley? Okay. Okay.
The next 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Everybody wants their book autographed.
Great. Did you hear that? Sharon actually needs to leave to pick up her son from school in like just 5 or 10 minutes. So now is your chance if you want the Mommy and Me gluten-free. Okay? And if there's a line at the register, run get it signed first and then go stand in line to pay, okay? All right. Awesome.